So we have a full house today, and I just want to set some expectations and ground rules. This is a 3-hour workshop, which means that you will work. So you need to have either paper or a cell phone that you can write on, or a laptop. If you don't have those things and you can't participate, I would ask that you step out and make room for people that want to come in and work today. So this is going to be interactive. I will be a wolf among the sheep, stalking among you. I may ask you to speak up and share with the class. You're never forced to, so you can tell me no. But if you'd like to participate, that's what I'd love you to do. To get squared away, we have some resources that we're going to be working with. There's just not a really good way to deliver them to you. So if you are online, you have access to getting online. One way to do this is to go to Twitter, and to my Twitter account, which is Bright, B-R-I-G-H-T, 2 underscores, not just 1, Whitney, my name, W-H-I-T-N-E-Y. This Google Drive folder is all of the content that we're going to be working with today. I suggest that you download it to your machine, and if you can't, just have it open and work with it that way. This is built so you can also work with just pen and paper. It's just more convenient if you have the actual tangible resources. At the end of this talk today, this link will be going down. It won't be around forever, so please grab it now. And one more note, we are going to be talking about and poking at the free software called Twine. And so if you would like to download Twine now, that's a very good idea. It's twine.org. And we're going to be exploring how to use that software for narrative design and writing too. So this workshop is a workshop I've actually been running for quite a while. I usually run it with Clarion West out in Seattle. Clarion is a very famous creative writing nonprofit organization. They mostly work in the literary field, novels, short stories, but they've recently started working with me in games. So the whole point of this workshop, the level of it, is 101. Very basics of how to think about narrative design and writing, and it's very focused towards creating your first portfolio. So the assets you actually need to make, the writing that you need to do in order to get hired, either as a freelancer or a FTE position, full-time. So that's the goal, is that you're gonna have things that you make that you can put towards your portfolio and become a very successful narrative designer. Twine is a program. It's not an app. So only if you have a laptop, not a phone. Does anybody need more time to grab that link? Yes? Okay. All good, thanks. Yeah. Haha. We'll give you like 30 more seconds to do that. Download the whole folder. Yeah. I tried to figure out a way to deliver this ahead of time. There weren't any really good solutions. By the way, I guess I should introduce myself. So my name is Whitney Batran. I am the studio head of Dublin Entertainment. We are a new AAA mobile-first studio in Bangalore. We work outside of Whitefield. And we're making really, really interesting games, and we are hiring. So I'm just going to put that out there in case you haven't heard it from us yet. We've been saying it all week. Please take a look at our open positions. My background is in narrative design. I've been a narrative designer for 13 years, not just on video games, but on tabletop role-playing games, on live interactive theater, and pretty much anything where you can tell a story and it involves people imagining things. That's what I do. So several of my games have won narrative awards, and it's kind of my trademark in the industry is building really interesting characters with really interesting psychological structure. So we're going to get into a lot of that. I will warn you, this is a very fast-paced workshop. Please take copious notes. I know that you're going to want them. We're going to move through this information at a quick clip. I mean, not impossibly fast, but I have a lot to teach you in a short amount of time. Okay, this is going down. Okay, here we go. So here's our agenda, our introduction. We knocked that off. I'm going to talk briefly about the industry as I know it from the US, because I'm still gaining fluency in the Indian industry. We're going to talk about narrative structure, basic thoughts around that. Characters. We're going to spend a long time on characters. Dialogue and in-game text, narrative design in very brief. We're going to talk about Twine. We're going to talk about your portfolio. We're going to talk about steps that you can take to break into games as a writer and narrative designer. And most importantly, we're going to give you the tools to actually do that, which is learning by doing. So again, my goal for you is very specific. I want to enable you to build a successful portfolio to get work as a narrative designer and writer. We've already done this. I'm Whitney. I make a lot of narrative games. I'm pretty good at it, so hopefully I can be useful to you. So now I get to pick on you a little bit. I just want to hear from one or two people in the audience, why you're here, what you're hoping to get out of today, and then one of your favorite games. So I don't know, I'm going to pick a victim. There we go.
I have a story to tell through games, and that's why I attended this. I have no idea how to start as a game writer, and that's why I'm here.
Why don't you use the mic? And have you ever done any writing for video games before?
No.
Excellent.
Not yet.
And what game inspires you?
Not game, but the entire Transformers saga.
Transformers. Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'll take one more person who wants to share. Okay, how about you? Stranger.
Hi, my name is Indrani. I'm the studio head at Toronto Games. We're building very narratively driven games at my studio. And Whitney is a mentor of mine, and I've followed her work for a really long time, and I've always wanted to just get into your brain, so I'm very excited to be here. What I'm hoping to get out today is understanding how to, the technical nature of writing for games, because it's a very different art form than writing for other mediums, and how to think about it in the manner of a games writer. Have I done any writing for video games before? Yes, I've written for a game that I made along with Shubham over here, for a game jam project that we did together. And we learned a little bit through that, but it was very much intuitive and not from like an expert. So this is what I'm hoping to get out. What game inspires me? I'm a big fan of the game Venba, and I'm a little biased because I now work for that team, but that game, if you haven't played it, is a narrative cooking game, and it is the story of a South Indian immigrant mother who moves to Canada and raises a family there. And I think that it's a very narratively resonant game, and it uses mechanics and design along with story in a very cohesive manner, and that's something I hope to achieve with my games as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Indrani. Just out of curiosity, who was at the Resonance talk yesterday? A few people? Okay, not very many. Okay, cool. That's just good for me to know. So I want to talk about the industry, right? The industry is global, right? It's here, it's in the US, it's in Canada, it's in Europe, it's in South Africa. I can only tell you what I know from my own experience. But what I want to start with is the difference between writers and narrative designers. Sometimes those phrases are used interchangeably. And the reason for that is narrative design as a category of design is kind of new, right? Back in the old days, everybody wore every hat. The engineers wrote the dialogue. Sorry, but you guys aren't very good at that, right? And they did the art, and they did everything else. And what we realized is writing and narrative design is a highly specialized skill, just like everything else. And so as the industry has built itself up, has built up its knowledge base and its financial structure, we have the ability to pay full salaries, full-time employees that do narrative design and writing. So what is the difference? So first, there's pure writing. Pure writing is kind of rare, even in very saturated markets where there's a lot of jobs. And that's because we expect developers to do a lot of different kinds of work, right? But you find pure writers at very big studios like BioWare, right? They're making big narrative games. They can employ 8 people to write full time, and that's still not enough to finish a game in 5 years. So they just write. They use pre-made tools. They use Excel spreadsheets. By the way, if you love narrative, you're going to be using Excel till you die. And they just do the dialogue, the story, and the character development and the story development. Narrative designers are design thinkers, right? They are part of the design team, and they do things like create dialogue systems, quest systems. They say, how can our mechanics and our story fuse together to create resonance, right? They're big proponents of resonance. And so that takes skills like scripting, right? Working in Unity or Unreal 5, implementation, so taking all the dialogue written by whoever wrote it and actually putting it in the game. Now, I can tell you there's financial incentive to be a narrative designer over a writer. Writers generally just make less. That's just kind of the reality of the situation, and narrative designers are more valuable. So if you're a pure writer, consider thinking about picking up some narrative design skills so that you at least have fluency with the rest of the design team, and you can grow into that over time. So where can you find narrative designers and writers? Everywhere. You can be solo and do this, right? You can be an indie and do this, and you can be AAA. Narrative is in everything, right? Narrative is not a story. It's the creation of meaning. So any game, Tetris, right, has narrative. It may not have a story per se, but you're deriving meaning out of that game. So anywhere there's a game, there's narrative. So it doesn't matter if it's console or if it's mobile or if it's PC, this is important. There's also something I want to point out called interactive fiction. Some folks know what this is. So interactive fiction is kind of like visual novels, but without the visuals. Basically, it's hyperlinked text novels that are actually quite popular in a lot of different places. And people will actually pay you money to write these. Choice of Games is one of them. And it's a different form of doing that narrative design and that writing that is, I want to say video game adjacent, because I don't think interactive fiction is video games. Like, I'll die on that hill. Some people will disagree with me. But that is also a part of this cloud of stuff that we can do as writers. So where do narrative designers and writers fit in a team? Well, ultimately, it should be highly collaborative, right? Good games are very interdisciplinary, and you shouldn't be in a little bubble on your own, just being told, go write these 500 lines, right? You should be involved in understanding the core themes, understanding in what this game is trying to say, and being a part of that conversation. And this comes up a lot. Do narrative designers and writers need to know how to code? No, right? I'm a studio head. I've been a narrative director for 4 years. Before that, I was a narrative designer for 10. I don't know how to code, right? So if coding, you think that is stopping you from being a narrative designer or a writer, it is not, right? If you're in Unreal, you can use blueprints, right? You can use scripting languages. It is not necessary. Is it useful? Yes, right? It's useful to be able to have a shared language with engineers, but you do not need to know how to code. That is not a requirement. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about narrative structure. So when we think about narrative structure, we're talking specifically about storytelling. And the best way to set yourself up for success is to start with the basics, which is the 3-act structure, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. Now, that might sound untricky, but it is actually tricky to get right because the interstitial parts, right, the pacing, is what you do have to get right, whether it's a video game or a Bollywood movie or whatever else. If it has a story, pacing is a skill that you learn, and you need to get good at it to make the 3-act structure work. So if you try to derive a formula, like, okay, on page 15, on every MCU script, like, they have this thing where they discover what the problem is, right? Fine. But like, that's not actually going to get you good narrative in the long run. What's going to get you good narrative in the long run is understanding the structure and then growing out from it, right? So what you want to do is experiment. So there are lots of different kinds of narrative structures in different kinds of literature, in different cultures, and in different places. So this is where it really pays to be curious, which is and should be the core trait of any designer, right? Be a culture vulture. Just eat and eat and eat and eat, because ultimately this is going to serve you really, really well. So that means read Chinese epics, watch French dramas, you know, like consume a lot of isekai anime, right? It's going to teach you something that you didn't know. Yes, I see the nods. Hallelujah, right? So be curious, consume a lot of different kinds of media, get outside of your bubble, and experiment. Now, branching, right, narrative branching, choosing paths is a part of narrative structure, but that's quite complex, so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. My favorite slide. So if you're familiar with narrative structure in Hollywood, then there's this thing called the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is basically a formalization of some work that a scholar named Joseph Campbell did on world mythology, right, some decades ago. And his thesis was that, hey, all stories kind of share these common things, and we can see them in every culture. What does that mean? And then some guy in Hollywood named Vogel said, I can make a formula out of that and make lots of money. Formulas don't work, guys. Formulas are dead on arrival. They have no soul. Your consumers are smart. They will feel it, they will know it, and it just won't be as successful. So please do not try to use the hero's journey wheel of growth as the template that you have to hit. It's good to know, it's good to understand, but I actually hate what that formalization of Joseph Campbell's work has done to at least my industry, where storytelling is now very, very derivative in a lot of American movies. So please don't go down that path. It's very painful. So here's the secret sauce of understanding what makes narrative structure good for video games. And it's the core skill of writing for interactivity. And what that means is you are making space for someone else. If you want to be an author and just tell a story, write a novel. That's not what video games are for. Video games are co-participatory between you, the designer, and the player. They are trusting you, and you have to serve that trust by serving their agency. Now, agency is not a free-for-all. You don't just get to say, okay, go do whatever you want, right? The player should be able to treat everything like it's GTA 5. That's not true. Agency is a delicate dance. It's a magic trick. It's an illusion that we give the player to make them feel good about the choices they make. But we are planning every move of every choice that they make, right? So what this means is understanding human psychology is very important. Understanding people, right? We can code the best code, but if we don't understand what motivates each other, we're not going to be very good narrative designers or writers, right? So in practice, what that means is building a structure for someone else to fill, right? Building a box so that someone else can sit in it. It means actually seduction. It means pulling them in to where you want them to go, not pushing and going this, right? Nobody likes that. But if you go, come hither, right? If you understand what that's like. Oh, am I making you excited, Indrani? Then you have a winning product. So again, what's going to serve you is curiosity about human nature, about what motivates us, and about our emotions. Now, there's this fancy phrase in narrative design. It's called ludo-narrative harmony. It's kind of overplayed, but what it means is ludo, right, Latin for play, narrative, we know what that means, and harmony, it means the mechanics and the story are in harmony. So there's also ludo-narrative dissonance, and that is when the mechanics and the story are not working together. So if you are a writer or a narrative designer, you are working with mechanics that you don't have say over most of the time, actually, right? Some other part of the team is doing that if you're not a one-man show. And so your job is to create harmony between what's going on with the narrative, the meaning of the game, the story, the themes, and what the mechanics are actually doing. That's the phrase for it. It's ludo-narrative harmony or ludo-narrative dissonance. So now you know a very fancy $10 word that you can throw around and be like, yeah, I'm a narrative designer. I know what ludo-narrative harmony is. Okay, so now we're going to talk about characters and how to make really, really good ones. In particular, we're going to focus on very tight ensemble casts, casts that work together. So when you think of shows that have really tight ensembles and you love every one of those people, that's what we're going to work on. Now, it is an industry must, no matter where you are in the world, to write diverse characters. right? Characters of all different kinds of backgrounds, psychologies, life experiences, and that's because you're serving players that are both like you and not like you, right? You can't leave the people who are not like you off the table. And so for those of us in this room, I just want us to take a look around really quick and see who's here and who is not here. Now, I'm going to be honest, I see mostly men, right? There's some other folks in here too. But this is important because if your whole team is one kind of person and you sit down to write a thing, you're going to have huge blind spots, right? And so the first thing you do is say, okay, where are our blind spots? So that you can take care of it and make a more successful product. Because products that do diversity well make more money. That's really the bottom line, is you're leaving money on the table if you don't get this right. So how do we do that? How do we do that properly? How do we do that without getting canceled on Twitter? Here are some best practice tips, okay? I've been canceled on Twitter like twice, so I'm speaking from experience. Stereotypes are bad, right? If you're writing from a stereotype, please don't. Now, there's a difference between a stereotype and an archetype, right? An archetype is a basic personality pattern, right? We see it in a bunch of different kinds of people, and they can be interpreted in different ways. So I'm not saying don't be archetypal, but I am saying if you're just going for the easy grab, take a little more time. Watch for lopsided representation. And what that means is, are you unconsciously filling your game with all male characters by accident? Because you're just a bunch of guys sitting around and that makes sense, right? You're not doing it on purpose, but you forgot to check the bias. You know, do you have racial diversity in your game? Do you have gender diversity in your game? Do you have the kinds of stuff that makes people in the real world go, oh, that's for me, right? Because you don't want to leave their money on the table. As a writer, yes, go ahead.
You mentioned diversity, between diversity. What if my story or my environment does not allow diversity in the story itself? Then what do I do?
Then it's appropriate for your theme, right? So if your theme is, I want to say a very specific thing about men's experiences in World War II, right? Well, then it's going to be a bunch of men. That's fine. What I'm saying is if you're trying to build a product and you're accidentally leaving people out, you should catch that. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
If you said stereotypes are bad, but I have a character and he's like a communist, but that's what makes him fun.
Okay.
That really, every single problem he goes through it, he accepts it and he still likes it, and he just wants it. That's what makes him funny. So will that get me on kill? Probably
But
get me
here's
killed.
the point. He's still a person, right?
Yeah, but people do take it like that.
Okay. If you treat your characters like people, if they are more than a single note, right? If they're complex, right? That helps you escape stereotypes, right? Because what stereotypes are is they're harmful reductions of a type of person. You just don't want to be harmful. That's it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this one I've seen a lot with very junior writers, and that is trying to represent regionalisms and ethnic diversity with changing spelling to accommodate for accent. So like that there dog in the South Bayou, that kind of stuff, right? Oh, I have a terrible New Orleans accent. But I think you get the point. Like, don't change the spelling to do an accent. Just make them use the vocabulary way that's authentic, and you get it in the voice acting if there's voice acting. Because otherwise what you're doing is you're reducing the way someone's speaking to a caricature. It's not great. If you are writing characters from unfamiliar backgrounds, which I encourage you to do, get some help, right? Get a cultural consultant. There are lots of different kinds of cultural consultants for lots of different things. There's LGBTQ folks, there's folks from other different nationalities and ethnicities, other forms of marginalization. They're happy to work with you and make your game better. They're not scary, I promise, and they save you in the long run from making bad choices. If you're going to do research, actually looking up articles or books, it's important to get resources from the people within that culture that you are studying, not from an imperial or colonistic point of view, right? That's going to be tainted and you don't want to mess with that. And this last one here, I know it's really funny, but watch foreign soap operas. And the reason why I say that is a soap opera is actually a really condensed social construct of what matters in people's everyday lives, right? It's blown up, it's really dramatic, like, oh no, he's cheating on me, oh no, she lied. But the important part is the cultural response, right? So if you're unfamiliar with the culture, this is my personal hack. I will go and watch C-dramas or K-dramas or whatever else I'm trying to work with so that I can start to absorb what's important on a cultural level and cultural signifiers for expressing values, right? So, neat little hack. Okay, so let's talk character breakdown. So how you actually make a compelling character that other writers can pick up and write with you because you've made it in a way that's translatable and understandable, and especially useful for big teams when you need to pass characters between multiple writers, how to make them consistent. So I just want to point out that this is like my personal formula that I came up with for myself out of years of work. This is not an industry standard. You know, you probably won't find this in a lot of different places, but I'm showing you my method so that you can start thinking about your method about how you make characters. So you can do it a totally different way. This is not gospel. Okay. So this is a lot of bullet points, but we're going to break it down. So the way that I make characters is based basically on Jungian psychology. Carl Jung was a protege of Freud. Freud was nuts, and Jung is nuts too, right? They all have problems. But the thing about Carl Jung was his archetypal approach to understanding stories and people, right? So my work is very archetypally driven. And an archetype, again, I said this earlier, is a personality pattern that we all recognize within other people. And so the archetype could be a simple one, like the mother, right? And the mother can be interpreted in very many different ways. Like maybe she's very bearish, she's protective mother. Or maybe she's the martyr, and she's like, I do everything for you, why? You know, yes, there's some nods. Okay, so you understand this. So archetypes are wide open. They have a lot of information in them. And they're very succinct ways to communicate with our players a lot of information. They're kind of like zip files, where you go, whoop, okay, you get my zip file, you know exactly what I mean, because you understand the archetype unconsciously, right? You're doing unconscious work to go, oh, I understand the archetype. So we want to stay within the archetypal structure because it's very efficient. That's why we want to do it. So when I'm working on a character, I start with their basic archetype. So like I just mentioned, the mother, right? Okay, we're working with the mother. And the mother doesn't have to be a woman, right? Like, there are many other types of folks that can have mother-ish archetypal energy. I've seen it, right? The bear, the martyr, the do for everybody. Like, that's not just stuck within one gendered body. This is a type of way of being. And so the next thing I do is I say, okay, what's their archetypal territory? Now, you may be like, what's that? Well, I actually just explained it. So the archetype is the mother, but now I'm going to go into the sub-archetype of what exact type of mother is she, right? So maybe she's the worrier. Maybe she's the defender, right? So I understand which part of the archetypal space she's taking up, because again, archetypes are huge. They contain a lot of information, and you want to be specific. You want to be driven. Then I pick their complex, and I'm just going to skip ahead for a second. So what is a complex? This is, again, a Jungian term, but it basically means what's your damage? Like, who hurt you when you were a kid? You know, like, what do you have going on in here that's not great? All of us have complexes, right? We have these things in our psychology that bother us. And they're the things that most strongly hurt us. And we may not even be aware of it consciously, but it's there in our psyche. And it's there as writers for you to play with when you're making your characters. So I think the most famous complex is the Oedipal complex. I want to sleep with my mom. I know, it's gross, right? But that's what a complex is I'm messed up in some way. Everybody's messed up. You want them to be gloriously messed up so that you have something to work with, so that the dynamic and interesting things happen with these characters. So then there's drive. That's the next one on here. Did I have a slide for drive? I do. I'm so smart. Okay. So drive is specific. It is what the character is inspiring towards in relation to their complex. So not just what they want in life, I want to climb Mount Everest, but like, hey, I have this damage, and now I'm trying to fix it in this way by either being a good guy or a bad guy or pushing it down or bringing it forward, right? It's what's motivating you, pushing you forward in the world related to what's wrong with you. So I'm going to go to therapy. So one thing I will say about drive is this is a really good friction point between heroes and villains, right? So often what we see with heroes, right, is their drive is an affirmative response to their complex. They're going, okay, I have this damage, but I'm trying to make the world better because of it, right? Villains, they've been hurt, and they said, well, if I'm hurt, everybody else is going to be hurt, mwahaha, right? And so they're also trying to address their complex. They're just doing it in a toxic way, right? That maybe isn't even their fault consciously, but they're acting in bad ways because they're trying to assuage their pain. And that is a really kind of interesting villain to make. So you can also flip those drives, by the way. Like an anti-hero or a hero can have a negative drive, and a villain can have a positive drive. If you've ever seen The Boys, I think that is a great example. Yeah. Okay, shine. So shine is actually really important. It's simple, but it's what do we love about this character? And it goes for villains, it goes for heroes, it goes for NPCs. There has to be some spark, something that makes you want to interact with this character, to approach them again and again and talk to them or follow their story or save them or kill them, right? We want energy around this character, so we want to have a shine, which is what do I love about them? If you're thinking of like Baldur's Gate 3 and Astarion, right? Shiny as hell. Then there is moral. So this one gets kind of complicated. So let me get to my moral slide. So I work with something called moral foundation theory. It's actually not that complex, so don't freak out. But it basically states like, hey, all human cultures have about 6 morals in common, and the difference between these cultures is they just interpret them differently. So for instance, the moral of honor, right? In one culture, honor can be interpreted in a very specific way, and in another culture, a very, very different way. They still hold the value of honor, but its interpretation is entirely different, and so their cultural makeup is entirely different. So what I do, and I encourage you to try out, is I pick 2 morals from the universal list that is inherent to all cultures for this particular character, and I say, what are the 2 most important morals to this character? Maybe it's sanctity. Maybe they're a paladin, and it's really important for them to stay pure in whatever way that means to them, right? Or maybe it's authority, and their value is that authoritarian regimes are bad, and they should break that down, right? This is important to know where they stand and how they're going to react to stimuli in their world based on their values. So picking their values and understanding their values and how they will react to things is quite important. If you want to know more about moral foundation theory, there's a website, moralfoundation.org. Told you to be taking notes. And I encourage you to just do a little research and figure out how to work this into how you make characters. We're almost done, I promise. So then there is type. Now this is where we get into actual like video game land, where the structures of your video game are influencing what's happening. So this is specific to your video game. I can't tell you what it is, but it's like, hey, this is the defender, this is the forward, this is the right middle field, right? It's the assignation of what type of character it needs to be in your system. Signifiers are like, is it a he, she, him, her, they, them? What is their gender? What is their, like what moon were they born on? It is placing them in the context of their world. And again, this is within your game, so I can't tell you what it is, but you need to know how they represent themselves in that world. And then their simple arc. So the one sentence of how they're going to change from the start of your game to the end. Now again, this is personal opinion, but I think every character in your game should change somehow, right? They should move through an understanding or a way of being, and they should arrive at a different place. So it could be as simple as learns to trust and love, or becomes bitter enemies with their former lover, or whatever it is. But the important part is psychologically they have shifted, right? They have become a slightly different person. Now, you don't want them to yeet themselves out of their archetype. That is bad. Keep them within their archetype, okay? Don't do that. But say, hey, they've evolved or devolved emotionally and psychologically. And then the very last thing that I do is give them a name, because then I know who they are. I know everything about them, and then hopefully the name is resonant, right? It makes sense, and it is evocative of who they are under the surface. So that's a lot to hold in your head, but now we're going to do it together. Oh, I see some worried nods here. Okay, so we are going to spend 20 minutes working together on creating these characters with this pattern. So I had you download this sheet. I'm going to open it up on my computer and leave it up for people that can't work with the sheet. As I said, if you have pen and paper, this is still workable, so give me one moment. Can we all see that? No, we can't. Can I get some technical help so we can see our spreadsheet? Anybody? Bueller? Thank you, mon capitaine. We got it. Thank you. Okay, so here's the assignment. Using the structure that we just went through, see if we can make it small enough and big enough at the same time. I want you to make 2 characters that know each other. This is important for later because we're going to scaffold on this. Using the method of making a character that I just showed you. So archetype, archetypal territory, then complex, then drive, then shine. So I'm going to be silent now, and you're going to write. And we will circle back when we're done. If you have questions, I'm going to be walking around. Grab me. OK, I'll get over there. And if it's a very useful question, I'll make you say it for everybody. No pressure. All right, start. I'm going to go talk to him. I'll be right back. Hi. There are risks, yes. But an archetype is anything that you can think of that seems like it would be recognized in a lot of places. So think of like all the gods, basically. Gods, mini gods. All of them are basically archetypes, right? So if you're struggling for which archetype to use, think about kind of who they are. Does that make sense? Huh. Shiva, the destroyer, right? Archetypally. Make sense? They do. So you pick one part of it that you want to work with. Make sense? Okay. How you doing, Mikkel? How was that?
I love this.
Okay.
No, really, like this is really good stuff.
Okay.
The template.
Yeah. So the question was, what is an archetype? Which is a fair question. So archetypes are really resonance. Again, I'm saying personality patterns, but that may not be helpful. So let's just pick like gods, for example. We were talking about Shiva, right? Shiva is a very archetypal type of god, which they all are. All gods are basically archetypes. But in particular, Shiva is the destroyer, right? So his archetype actually have, I think, a destroyer up there on my example, right, is a very popular archetype. And even if you don't think you know the name of an archetype, I bet you actually do know the archetype. So there's not like a fixed list of like, that's an archetype or that's not an archetype. You actually already know. And you can kind of name it whatever you want as long as it makes sense, okay? Yes, sir.
If you add more than one, like If I add more than 2, does it oversaturate the character?
It might be hard to figure out what they're going to do in a situation if you overload. That's why I picked 2, yeah. So the question was, for moral foundation theory and picking 2 morals to stick with, if you wanted to pick more than that, could you? I'm not the arbiter. You can if you want to, but I don't, because I think that oversaturates the character and your ability to understand what they'll do in a situation that you put them in, because there's too many competing values about how they're going to react. So I like to keep it a little simpler. So they can be, so the question is, what about unpredictable characters? Aren't unpredictable characters cool? Yes, but they should be unpredictable to the player, not to the writers. Writers need to be able to write consistently, so you need to know how they work, but you can obscure that from the player. Yeah. And I saw a hand over here, I'm coming. Yeah. Hi.
Archetypes of I was thinking of a story where 2 people, both of them are serial killers, partners.
Uh-huh.
They don't know they're serial killers. Both of them are acting dodgy, so both of them think they're cheating on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so what exactly do you mean by an archetype? I mean, what?
What's their basic personality?
Oh, basic. Okay.
Yeah.
we got it.
Make sense? Okay. Hi.
Link on the Twitter. I think it was supposed to be here, right?
Can you refresh? Because I haven't deleted it yet. That's really weird.
I know, right? Do you have link somewhere else? Maybe if you remember it on top of your head.
It's a Google Drive link, so it's really long. Yeah. Do you have LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can put it on my LinkedIn. Okay.
Can I know if I could take this approach where I start off with a thumbnail sketch and then like build on top?
However
of my
you
sketch?
work the way that you want to.
Great, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Just 1 sec. I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. Yeah.
So, how do you quantify a character like Joel from The Last of Us?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for certain people, he's a hero. For certain people, he's the anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about figuring out the drive of anti-hero or hero and positive versus negative, and write such complex characters? Is there like a drive that's like a gray area drive apart from positive and negative?
Definitely. Yeah. I'm just trying to make it simple for 101 class. So there's a question about gray drives, whether it's a positive drive or a negative drive. Can you have more complex drives? My answer is yes, but this is a 101 class, so it's easier if they just polarize because it's easier for you to work with. Yes?
Really understand what are you supposed to write.
You're supposed to make a character, 2 characters.
No, then what is there on natural territory until that? It's an example.
So archetype, and then the type of sub-archetype that it is, that's the territory, right? So we're talking about the mother, right? And then her sub-archetypes are like the bear or the martyr. That's what territory is. You pick one. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, I'm coming. You guys are making me work.
So I did confuse like territory, please. What is territory? Do you mean like the physical game environment where
No,
it's
no.
there?
So the question that actually is coming up several times, so that's my fault, is territory, the second column. So when I was talking about archetype and then archetypal territory, that's what I mean. So again, we'll go back to the very basic example of the mother. That's the archetype. The archetypal territory is whether she's the bear, the very protective mother, or the martyr, or the other kinds of mothers, right? Again, archetypes are large spaces. We're saying we're occupying this part of the archetype with this character. Does that make sense? Okay.
Follow the flow of defining each, or can I just start with a model and then think of like what the character?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, can I start anywhere in this process, or do I have to start with archetype? You don't have to do anything. This is the way that I do it. So I would say for the point of this class, do it my way. and then you can adapt from there. It's my way or the highway. What would?
Thinker.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yep. I'm coming. One second, I'm going to talk to him first.
Just wanting to ask how to find my complex for the character which I'm writing right now.
What do you want to be wrong with them?
Huh?
What do you want to be wrong with them?
Okay.
Basically, what thing hurt them when they were a kid? What do they have a problem with? Are they afraid of dinosaurs? Are they afraid of being abandoned by the people that love them? Are they afraid of showing weakness? Right? What is the thing they're most afraid of?
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So again, it's archetype, archetypal territory, so which part of the archetype you're in. Complex, which is your damage. Drive, which is what you want to do in relation to your damage. And shine, what makes that character lovable. Not nice, lovable. I'm coming. One sec. There's a lot of questions. I'm coming right for you.
What is the archetype of Naruto and how do you put him here in this
Oh,
game?
Naruto. So he's the underdog, right? He's always coming from behind to become the most powerful, but he starts at the bottom. Yeah? Does that make sense? So the question was a good question, which is what archetype is Naruto? And I think we can all have opinions here, but I would pick underdog, right? The guy who's always trying to catch up and become the most powerful. But all of us can interpret it in slightly different ways. Okay, yes.
So you're building AI NPCs and you're trying to give them character depth. And for this, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Would this framework be super useful in doing that?
I have no idea. I don't work with AI.
As in, if you have like, a character that's just hanging around in a game, and you go to them and they start talking, there's a backstory. And
So I don't know how AI would connect drive and complex. I think that's where it would mess up. Archetype, yeah. But that really integral part of what makes them really human, because they're interrelated, right? And it can't be random. Yeah. Okay, a few more minutes, folks. So hoof it. I told you you're going to work hard. Hi. Thank you.
My question is that every time I'm trying to think of two characters, I end up thinking of them in a context of a novel or a story. In terms of a game, when do I is the consideration of the gameplay right at the beginning, like, okay, this is what they're going to do. Is this going to be, let's say, a 3D platformer game or an adventure game? So do I need to think of that before I need to think of my characters, or does especially in the context of this exercise, maybe not in a studio, but
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
it doesn't matter,
No.
right? Yeah.
No. I'm coming. Yes, one second.
We just need to write it like this.
Haha. Yeah, you got it.
For a studio, it will be like, okay, I'm making a game and then
Within the context, yeah. Okay. All right, a couple more minutes. You guys have lots of great questions. Hi.
Just trying to understand how you go about this. So,
Mhm.
like, if you have multiple characters that are very close to each other,
Mhm.
know each other very well, do you define each of the columns together? Like you create the archetype of both of them first, then go about the territory?
So you're asking the super question. So this is a really great question about building ensembles, which is characters related to each other contextually. So this is actually a different class that I teach, but basically you treat an ensemble cast in the way that I do things, like they are a whole psyche within themselves, broken down into individual characters. Now this is kind of a trademark of mine. One of my most famous games is called Bluebeard's Bride. It's a TTRPG, and it's a game in which players all play different parts of the psyche of the same person. You can just do that at the same scale at a meta level with ensemble casts so that they all fit together, right? But they're all very different. So that is usually the approach that I take when I'm making a big cast, is I imagine the game, I know this is gonna sound really crazy, like a big soul. and I say which slice of the soul is each person. Does that make sense? Okay, great.
I have a question like regarding the shine. Like what's it is about? Like I couldn't understand it.
So we're asking for examples of shine. That's a great question. So shine can be, they're a wisecracker, and they always have something really cool to say when everybody's down. Or it could be they are a romanceable character, and they're very earnest, and even though they're hard on the outside, they're really lovable once you get to know them. Or if it's for a villain, maybe they are just like the sassiest boss queen on earth, and you're like, yes, queen, you're evil, but I love your energy, right? So it's something that you love about the personality of that character, hero, villain, or whatever else. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm starting my final run up to the stage. If they're what? There's still something about them you have to be attracted to. It doesn't have to be something good. It has to be something that says, ooh, I want to know more about them. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. I know there are many questions. I know. It's tough. Told you were going to use your brains. Okay, so take a breath. Look up. How do you think you did? Okay, so some nods, all right, some really bewildered looks, and some stress. I think that's pretty normal for a one-on-one workshop where I'm teaching you the secret list of secret sauces. Please make sure that you take notes on this. Feel free to steal it. This is not like trademarked international like secret property. This is just how I do things after years of being a narrative designer, and I want to share with you because I want you to make effective characters that people love. Okay, we're going to be moving on. Okay, so now we hopefully have two characters that we understand, okay, because now we're going to be talking about dialogue and how they talk to each other. So dialogue is definitely a skill. And dialogue is what characters say to each other in a game. It can be voiced or unvoiced, right? It can be just text, or it can be even gestures, like if there's no text in your game, or it can be verbal. And dialogue is very tricky because the human ear is very, very trained to understand nuance in speech. And so if something is off, we notice. And you want to be very, very good at dialogue if you're writing it because people will notice if you don't get it right. Now, how do you build your skill in writing good dialogue? Again, it's by absorbing good dialogue. So what I would suggest is that you look towards award-winning screenplays, right? Really well-regarded movies, and not actually video games, right? Video game dialogue is growing in maturity. It's getting more sophisticated. But if you want to write the best dialogue, do not mirror what is already in games. It's not good enough. I'm just telling you right now. Right? Base your stuff off of what real people are saying in really good films and television and build your ear from there. I started watching all films and television with subtitles on about 10 years ago, specifically so I could start matching what I was hearing and what I was seeing in text so I could build that proficiency for myself. I just do it all the time. I actually still do it. So it's a good trip. If you want to get a hold of scripts and you don't know how, there's a lot of free databases online. Go look up the scripts of the stuff that you love, right? The stuff that motivates you, and read it. See how it is written on the page. Go watch it and see how it's different from how it's written on the page and how it's spoken out loud and how it's the same. This is going to help you build that muscle and that proficiency. Now, when you're writing for games specifically, there are some different rules for writing dialogue than anywhere else. Movies, right? Novels, God forbid poetry. Right? We have certain rules. And that is universally dialogue has to be as short as you can make it. Now, there are exceptions, right? There's an exception to every rule. But in general, you want dialogue to be short. Why? When you are playing a video game, half your brain is already concentrating on all the kinetics of what you're doing, moving in the world, solving the puzzles, and all that stuff. Your players are only half listening to what you're saying. at the best of times. So they can't just sit and absorb a bunch of stuff unless they're a very particular type of player persona where that's the only thing that they want to do. And that's not everybody, folks. Again, if you do this, you're leaving money on the table. So make your stuff short. And you need to make a line do double or triple duty. What does this mean? It means it does 3 types of work at once. This is actually very hard, right? People underestimate the skill sets of narrative designers and writers because this is not easy. So what should a piece of dialogue, a line, be telling you in a game? Well, one, it should tell you what you need to know for gameplay, right? Like, dodge the grenade, go left, right? Like the stuff that matters for mechanics, that's the basics, right? Then it needs to tell you about the character that's saying it, something about their personality, their secrets, their past, their desires, some little giveaway about who they are. And then third, that line should be doing world building. It should be telling you about the world this line is being set in, about something important that's happening politically, or something that's happening between the nations that are fighting, or whatever it is, right? Your world building. So that is a lot to ask. Like, and let me be really clear, that is very difficult. But the best lines, right, are really packed, and they do this really well. When you're writing lines that should be read out loud, you want to watch for things that are going to mess up your voice actors. So those are things like too many S's and plosives. Wait, hang on. That's a plosive, right? Voice actors are trained to try to deal with these things, but there's only so much they can do if your dialogue is not written for the ear, right? If it's not written to be said out loud. And that's the other secret, is if you're writing dialogue, read it out loud. I would sit at my desk in my open office plan and just read dialogue out loud all day. And I used to, God, this is so embarrassing. I used to do the sock puppet method, which is, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? I think that's really great. I looked like a crazy person. But what happened was I was hearing my dialogue and going, oh, that's too many S's. Oh, that doesn't flow correctly, right? Now, you don't have to do it by yourself. Table reads are great. Table reads are when you have a script and you pass it around, and a bunch of your developers read it all out loud together. That's actually very fun. I love table reads. But if it's meant to be said out loud, say it out loud before it gets to your voice actor. Because otherwise you're spending time, money, resources, and efficiency on things that you could have spent on somewhere else. So now we're going to take a look at the anatomy of a dialogue spreadsheet. So for me personally, when I first started writing in video games, the spreadsheet thing freaked me out. I was like, what do you mean I write dialogue in a spreadsheet? Like, how do I use the spreadsheet? What does the spreadsheet look like? What do you mean? So I'm going to give you some context about what a dialogue spreadsheet looks like, and I'm just going to pull it up on my computer right now. Okay, so this is very basic. Ugh, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Switching between spreadsheets and other stuff it does not like. Thank you, you're the master. Okay, oh, let me fix that column line here. It didn't like being downloaded. That didn't help. There we go. Okay, so what I just want you to do here is absorb some information. So this is a really, really basic spreadsheet that you would use to plug into a narrative engine somewhere else when you're writing dialogue. So this is actually some early prototype dialogue from Holla Vista. So this is a game that I worked on that got made that is on the iOS App Store right now. This is a conversation in chat between 2 characters in this game. So this is actually a written conversation, not an oral conversation. And I just want to break down like what's actually happening with these columns. So the chat ID is which conversation is this, right? We're writing a bunch of different conversations. Which one is this? Okay, So it's chat D1, S1, which means that's day 1, scene 1, right? And you can make whatever designation you want for your IDs of your conversations, but make it in a way that you can understand and be consistent with, so that when you're trying to manage all your assets, you don't have a nightmare on your hands. That's very important. Line ID, that's the second column here. So line IDs, please listen to me. They should always be absolutely unique. There should never be a line that has the same line ID as another ID, like another line, even if it's the exact same thing, said the exact same way. If you're deploying it in a different place, it has a unique ID. You will hose yourself if you do not have unique line IDs. So if it is a written line of dialogue, whether voiced or just typed out, it should always have a specific unique ID in your system. In this case, this is just who's speaking. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but the line IDs, don't you just procedurally generate them, or do you write line IDs for each and every one of them?
So the question was, why don't you just procedurally generate line IDs, or do you have to do them by hand? It depends on your resources and your team, right? This was a team of 5 people. I did it by hand. But that's not the case for everybody, and if you can proceduralize them, please do. That's much easier. So in this case, it's post writer, but it could be speaker, and that is, who is the character speaking, right? I have Work It Razzo, which is the character's screen name, basically, and Caramel Afternoon, which is the other character's screen name. So that's how we call them, and we know who's speaking, but it could be Jan, or Arjun, or whoever. We need to know who the speaker is. Then there is the actual line. We finally got there. Congratulations. Writing the line is only part of writing dialogue, unfortunately. And then there is next ID. So I won't get too complicated because this is where branching can come in, right? And it says, basically, it's pointing towards, what's the next line? Where do I go from here? And there are really, really many different ways to structure this, depending on what you're making and how you're making it. But you do need to know what line your line calls next, or if it calls no line, it shuts the conversation and goes to the next thing. So those are like the really basic ways of thinking. Okay, I'm writing dialogue. Here's what I need to have besides just writing the lines, right? That's how it's different from writing a screenplay, is we have so much other information that we need for games to be able to actually write dialogue. So that works. It's just not the other way around. Okay, so next piece of exercise for you. So now, I know the big size. You're going to take the 2 characters you created, and you are going to write a conversation spreadsheet style using my template. Now, if you are just using a piece of paper, I suggest you still try to write out the line IDs and stuff just for practice so you understand structurally what's happening. But I'm going to take that example one back up so you can look at it. If you downloaded my folder at the beginning of class, there's a spreadsheet waiting for you that's templatized that you can just open and work from. So we are going to spend 20 minutes on that, and you are going to write a conversation aiming for about 15 lines total. We're not talking about like a big deal here. 15 lines total for like 7 per character, of back and forth, however you want to do it, with line, right, and next. So I'm going to pull up my spreadsheet, and I'll walk around again to answer questions. But basically, you're going to write their conversation the way a video game writer would do it. Every time. Let's see. Let's see if I can do it on my own display. Nope. Any conversation that those 2 characters that you just created want to have. Windows P, okay. I can be taught. Duplicate. Hey, you're a genius. Okay, here's the example. What I care about is the conversation ID, the line ID, the speaker, the line, the next ID. So don't just write lines. That's what authors do. Write like a video game writer. Write it in this style. 20 minutes. We're not thinking about that right now. We're just doing a conversation. Haha.
Like from the previous part, from the characters.
You're going to get me anyway, huh?
Yeah. Like, do you know
I do. I'm an INTJ. If you want to use that, because that's a structure you know, go for it. Yeah.
Like I have a lot of knowledge about it. I was like, I like first imagine the MBTI type of my life.
It can be very useful, yeah.
That's what I did.
Good. Adaptation. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, yeah. Make it easy on yourself. Hi.
From the previous one, I had a confusion with drive and shine. So this is what I wrote, like mine was a protector, and their drive would be to protect everyone.
Perfect.
And shine would be they are strong and reliable. And for the lover, I wrote like somebody who's very optimistic to make everything happy and beautiful. And the next would be their shine would be like be a cheerleader.
Got it.
So I
Okay.
don't know if that's okay.
So
right?
what I would suggest, I think this one is fine. For the second one, make it about who they are, not their verbs, not what they do. Because here you say, make everything seem simple. That's their actions. Do what's underneath the actions. Like what's about their personality, not their actions, that makes them lovable. So maybe they have a sunny outlook, or they're always positive, right? Does that make sense? We're just going one layer under where you're at right there. Yeah.
I kind of use characters I wrote already.
No, go for it.
Before.
Yeah,
Can I like then just to write about them?
go for it,
I
yeah.
have them already in mind.
Do it.
Can contradictory complexes go hand in hand ever?
What do you mean?
Like I have a character, if I have a character which is confident as hell, okay, but he is hollow from inside as well. Like,
Oh, that's perfect. That's so juicy. Yes.
but like how like how it is possible if he is confident?
Because at some point he's going to crack,
Okay.
right? And you're going to show the audience
Oh.
what's underneath that, and they're going to go, oh, I knew it. Yeah.
Okay. Can both the characters have the same complex?
Yeah, definitely. Trauma bonding. Trauma-informed character creation. I'm coming.
Of the sheet. So on the ID says that for the next line you have to pull it's this one. But in the case of so like branching, like dialogue or something, like what would you put in that section? Or like if the dialogue is ended, would you like put like an end, or would you like kind of say next ID pull like XYZ scene?
It sometimes just depends on like the system that's being made. So sometimes it's blank and sometimes it's /exit or whatever, right? So #exit means that's the line end. So you can do it however you want if you're doing it. I would just suggest not doing narrative branching right now.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Be linear.
okay.
Yeah.
Like my own understanding of like like because obviously like I have done a bit of narrative
Mhm.
before, and I've made it, so I was just kind of like hoping to get more of like the technical side of it. So that's why I'm like looking at all the templates. I'm kind of thinking, okay, if I were to like would if you did have branching dialogue, would it be included in the sheet? Or
Yeah.
would you just say refer to?
No, what I would do is I'd just put like different sections of the branching in different places so I could keep track of them. So it calls the line ID next, but doesn't actually have to be the next line in the sheet. It can be towards the bottom, right? Yeah.
Is there any specific reason you have alternating I's and C's in your line ID?
Yes. So there was a question about how I had done my line IDs. One is an I and one is a C. That represents their names, actually. So I know, for me, when I was writing this, every time it ended in C, it was Carmel Afternoon. Every time it ended in I, it was the other character. That was just an easy way for me to know who was speaking. But you could do it a different way.
Okay. Second question, non-verbal cues. Is that something you can kind of put in brackets in your dialogue, or this is just something that's within the system?
Absolutely. So the question was, what about nonverbal cues, actions, that kind of thing? Yes, you would have a separate column, and you'd be like nods head, or whatever it is. We're just making it really simple today, but yes, we would have stage directions in a column on a more, breath-worthy sheet.
I just want clarification on the chat. I missed that.
So that's which conversation is this? This is only one conversation, right? Which is why there's only one ID, but we're calling this conversation. So there's other conversations in other spreadsheets. So you only need to name it once.
Okay, so each sheet is one conversation.
It depends on how you structure it, but for this project, that's how it was.
Sorry, just to come back. In the context of the game, it would be in a scene there may be multiple.
And it will just call the different conversations, which is why they need different IDs.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for working so hard on this in a hot room. I appreciate it. I'm coming. Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
You're doing dialogue, and let's say you've got a really cool line, but I know that a real person wouldn't say that. But then it's really cool, and it works for A, the world, B, the call to action, and C, also the character. How do I navigate through whether it makes sense, because people are not going to speak it out loud because it's text. Do I go with it, or do I not do it? Do I keep working on it?
Yeah, I mean, if you really think it's going to work, try it. You catch it in user testing if it doesn't work.
Writer's bias. I love it. It's my baby.
Do you have an editor? Do you have other writers to ping it off of? Right? Always get other eyes in. Try to write in
But what
teams.
about the whole a real person wouldn't say it, but this is not a real person?
If you can get away with it, get away with it. Yeah. I mean, all that we do in video games is build illusions. So, yeah. I mean, however you think it's going to be helpful.
No, like she wanted to say, but you can't be said really. Like, can change the environment, parody way or
But like for narrative designers, like in existing games, you work with so many constraints that you're working more around the constraints rather than it's more hacky.
Yeah.
Than just creating.
It's hard. You're bending yourself into pretzels. Team project. I'm going to sneak by you.
Like in the example, should the characters always alternate lines, or can the same character say multiple lines?
They
in
can
a
say
row?
multiple lines in a row.
So
Yep.
line length is more important than.
Definitely, yeah.
So what if the character can, like an animal, like a dog, be another character, but then there won't be any dialogues. There'll be, like you said, stage directions or like sound, or how do you want the dog to react? So how would it
Yeah.
work out in a conversation style? Because like, so I have the character saying something, he's talking, but the dog is going to just make sounds.
So you can use brackets usually and be like dog sounds or woof woof,
So
right?
then it's just one character's dialogue.
But you can put in stage directions in this case and be like, the dog seems happy, the dog is sad, the dog wags its tail. Yeah, whatever you need to do to get expression across. Yeah.
So do we need to create a new line ID if a character is speaking two lines?
Yes. Every line has a unique ID. I'm coming.
Two questions.
Okay.
One of them requires a preface. So basically, I had read upon Campbell's theory, and I actually haven't read Frankenstein.
Yes, I love Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think the genius of Frankenstein is that it starts off with one character, Victor being the protagonist, and it ends off with the monster being the protagonist. So somewhere in between they switch up. I don't know exactly at what point, but basically that kidnapping in Geneva and all that things.
No, this is good.
Basically at the kidnapping in Geneva and all those points, they basically transition the crown of being the protagonist from Victor to the monster, right?
Well, I think the monster was the protagonist the whole time.
It doesn't start off with the monster being the protagonist, right?
It doesn't start off with him being the point of view character, right? Frankenstein is a point of view character. But throughout the whole thing, the monster is the protagonist. This is actually a literary debate.
Isn't that the point of being the protagonist, that the point of view character is the protagonist?
No. Think of Game of Thrones.
I haven't watched.
Okay, maybe you should read Game of Thrones. But there's many point of view characters, right? They're not all the protagonist.
Yeah. My point was that, see, Frankenstein is such a deviation from Campbell's theory because it does not take that natural route a hero should take. It does not take a natural route a villain should take. It's basically flowing freely, right? But Frankenstein can never be adapted into a game.
Why not?
Because it's more of a emotional thing, right? It's more of a
Games are pretty emotional.
yeah. Sorry, that was not the point. But I don't know. Maybe I'm.
Sounds
not
like
good.
maybe you should try.
Yeah, maybe I'm not.
Maybe you should experiment.
But doesn't Campbell have a slight? Doesn't he have something? He has something. He struck something right with his theory, right?
Oh, definitely.
So like, wouldn't adapting that to a certain point be useful for us?
Understanding it is important. Using it as a formula is a dead end. That's my point. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the question is actually about an earlier part of our discussion about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and how I was like, please don't use a formula, right? So my background is actually I was an academic, and my master's degree is in mythology, and I was a Joseph Campbell scholar. Like, I had access to his Opus archives on campus. So to be really clear, like, I like Joseph Campbell and his work, right? I'm not saying that's bad. What I'm saying is you need to be more intelligent than using a formula, because a formula is a dead end. So understand the structures that he was talking about in Hero with a Thousand Faces or The Power of Myth, right? Those are his books. But don't just scrape it for this beat and then this beat because Joseph Campbell said so. Does that make sense? Okay. Down with the hero's journey. Okay, I'm coming. Go this way.
For example, I just generated NM0 to 15 or whatever, right? And then just added the alphabet afterwards and then copied it over here. Surely that works for something short like this. It just becomes an issue with.
I mean, if you have branching, it won't work.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Yeah.
the only time. But like something like this, it's fine.
Totally.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. What time is it? Okay. You're doing good. Yeah.
Maybe like an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, what's up?
To upload an emojis and a dialogues to show the expression.
Are they writing or are they speaking out loud?
No, the emoji like just like plain like here I wanted to
Are,
show
in
that-
this scene, are these characters writing or are they speaking out loud?
No, they're speaking out.
Then no emojis.
No, but it's like
You asked me, I'm telling you, no emojis. Okay.
The words and actually like walks over or cries or screams, should they contain those?
Those are basically scene notes. So we call those stage directions. I didn't want to make this sheet complicated, but if you need them, you just have a stage directions like column. And you say, okay, with this line separately, they're going to do this. Make sense? So I would, in the future, place those stage directions in a different column and just leave the line as the line. Yeah. So I'm having questions about stage directions, which is like they nod or they run away or they scream, stuff that's not actual words. Ideally, you would put that in a separate column, just called stage directions, right? This one doesn't have it because I was just trying to be simple. But if you really need to show basically the meaning of the line with context, right? There's a context that changes how the line is interpreted. You put it in the stage directions column. You can just make one. You can add a column really quick and add stage directions. But I was just trying to make it simple for us for these first 20 minutes.
How to approach a pause in the conversation where gameplay needs to be accounted for, where the NPC is, present as a supportive character for the player character to accomplish a task. When they ask if hints, right?
Yeah. That's all back-end code. That's like
Right,
JSON
but,
and stuff.
But when writing it down, so here
It doesn't go in the line.
it doesn't go
No.
line, right? So it would be a separate beat in
Yeah.
and of itself. So this would have to close as a conversation.
Yeah.
For it to move on to the gameplay portion of it.
Yeah,
If
you need
this was
to
like a cut.
tell whatever system it is, this is done, load the next thing. Yeah. Yes.
These lines that we're putting in, now, do we put them in keeping in mind some kind of branching alternatives?
Not
or we
today.
Just like a screenplay
Yes.
would be straight?
Yeah. We could, but that's 102, not 101. So I know this is difficult. I know this is high cognitive load. I'm going to ask that you stick with it. Try to finish this up. Try to write this scene of about 15-ish lines. Because this is all scaffolded exercises as they're built on each other. So you really want to try to get it done. I'm coming.
Say, take Sasuke for example.
Uh-huh.
As a normal guy who's actually speaking, can he say a dialogue and then say another dialogue?
Yes.
Without.
Different line ID. Different line ID. Every line is unique ID. Every line.
What if there's a pause between one statement and the other?
Is it in the same line in the spreadsheet?
No.
Then it's a different line ID. Yeah. Yes.
With the line, how do I write the emotions you're conveying, like if they're angry or sad?
So that would go in stage directions, right? I was just talking about adding another column if you needed to, but for this exercise, you can leave it off.
It can be any conversation, like any situation, any.
They can talk about anything. It just, I would prefer it's the two characters you created in the earlier exercise. Yeah. If you want to.
I came late to the class because of the meeting, so I don't know if I missed anything.
This is for building your own portfolio, so you're good. I'm not going to grade you.
No worries.
All right, attention is starting to wander, so we're going to finish this up and go to the next thing. Whew, this is a marathon. All right, how did that one go? Okay. Some nods, more checked out faces, but we're doing okay. Yeah, there's still some people running. Okay, so we're gonna jump back into me talking and you resting your brain and absorbing. So I'm curious, during writing your dialogue, did you learn anything about one of your characters? Meaning, you wrote down their personality, and then you went, oh, they're in this situation. They did a thing. Can I just have any hands? Good. What that means is you built your character like an engine, right? So now you can put fuel in and make that dialogue go, or you can hand the schematic of this character off to your counterpart, and they can write it to the same consistency that you can because that character is running on their own underneath all of the structure. That's really the goal of this, is consistent characterization. Because we, again, are interdisciplinary, you can hand it off. People can write different sections, and it's all consistent because now that character is acting in consistency with themselves. And you didn't even know it. That's the power of Jungian psychology at work. Okay, we're not done with dialogue. We're now going to talk about the hardest dialogue there is, barks. My least favorite thing to write, if I'm being completely honest, and I make all my juniors do this so that I don't have to. I've paid my dues. So what are barks? If you've never heard this phrase before, barks are very, very, very short lines that are instructional. They are really meant to direct you in the game. That is their primary purpose. It's not character development. It's not story development. It's not a cutscene. It's you need to dodge that grenade or your game is going to end, right? That's what a bark is. I'm, again, going to be honest, barks are really hard, right? They're the hardest thing to write, and we make the juniors do it because we don't like doing it. So this is one of the first things you'll probably write if you are writing for a video game company as a freelancer or as an FTE, right? As a junior, you will be dealing with this. So barks are variations on the same thing. So you got to say grenade in 5 different ways right, that are entertaining, right, that characterize your character if you can manage it, and characterize your world if you can manage it, because that triple duty law still applies. So you will want to reach into your vocabulary to make varied barks, but there is a danger here in becoming too esoteric and using words that are just not a natural part of common vernacular, so the things we're used to hearing. So you can get a little bit into the weeds linguistically. You can reach for variations of barks so that it's not the boring line over and over again. You know, I took an arrow to the knee, right? We only need to hear that once. But you can't be so weird that it's like a 14-syllable word that's only in the dictionary and some kid won in a spelling bee in 1995. That won't work either. You've got to find the happy medium, which means you've got to be well read. So please read books and have a very large vocabulary. This will help you with barks and understanding what is natural and not natural to use in context. And on barks especially, you really need to watch out if it's verbalized dialogue, if it's dialogue that's going to be used by a voice actor, for the S's and the plosives. They will kill barks. And then you're in the middle of a recording session and you only have 4 barks when you need 5, and you can't think of the thing that you need to have them say. It's terrible. I've been there. You don't want to do it. So read your stuff out loud. Oh no, more work. Yeah, go ahead. Say that one more time for me.
Do they need to be closely tied to the mechanics you expect from the player? For example, if a grenade is coming, the bark would be duck or roll or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, but not always necessarily?
If it's a bark, it means that it's deploying in relation to gameplay. So it will always have to be telling you something to do in world right now. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we're going to practice writing barks. So we're going to do variations on a prompt on what we need you to write. I'm going to make you write 5 different versions of the same thing to get you a feel for what writing barks is like. And I, again, have an example spreadsheet that I'm going to pull up and that we can work from. It is also in your folder if you downloaded that at the beginning of the class. And it's Windows P. See, I remember. Okay, this is the whole sheet. I'm going to explain how we're going to do it. So in the A column, the left-hand side, this is, oh, why is it not showing that one? What's going on there? Oh, no, I need to reformat. One second. I'm going to do it the hard way because I'm not smart. Okay, there we go. So these are the individual barks that you're going to write, right? So an NPC asks for healing. An NPC asks for healing in a different setting, right? A character succeeds at a puzzle, so the bark says, hey, I've completed the puzzle. I'm letting you, player, know that I did that. And then finally, the hardest one is the procedural narrative bark. So let me just pause this for a second here. So procedural narrative, what is that thing? Procedural narrative is a type of narrative structure in a video game where you, the designer, don't actually know what exactly is about to happen, right? You've built a system that is going to deliver dialogue either on an RNG table or pull from some sort of world state, and you won't actually know, you can't even test what that's going to be like because it's going to be generative. So we call that procedural narrative. And procedural narrative writing is hard, which is why I'm making you do at least one, because you have to be kind of in the middle of specificity. So not too specific. So if you hear that line, you're like, wait, I heard that exact line like a half hour ago in a different context. But not too general that it's meaningless and it makes no sense. The first time I wrote procedural dialogue, it was actually on State of Decay 2, which is funny enough, I now work for those people as a studio head over at Britannia Media. That was Jeff Strain over at Undead Labs. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, what does this mean? So I just want you to take one stab at one procedural narrative line. I've set you up. There's a specific character. She's a female. She's in her early 20s. She's urban. Avoid stereotypes. And she's just going to tell you one line about her life story. Again, not too specific. I was 27 when my mom died. but not too general where it's like, I really like apples. Apples are nice, right? So I know it's hard. I know you don't quite get it, but I want you to try. So for each one, 5 variations, right? Read the description. The very first one is an NPC desperate for healing in a combat situation. Modern medicine and weapons, write 5 barks. Now do the same thing in a fantasy setting. Now do it for a puzzle. Now do it for procedural narrative. So let's see what you can do. I'm a-coming. Get my steps in. Oh, this is a great question. How many words in a bark? As little as possible, but usually like 5-ish at most, right? Like really, really short. Yeah. Training you to do it so I don't have to. How's it going? Yeah, I think good. Okay, good. As long as everybody's happy. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Are these dialogues that characters are saying, or can it just be like a UI prompt?
It is dialogue.
It has to be dialogue.
It is a dialogue. So the question was, and again, a good question, is this a UI prompt or is this a dialogue? We're writers, so this is dialogue. This is something said out loud by a character.
Modern medicine healing, could I just say, pass me a damn band-aid?
Yeah, that's perfect. Pass me a damn Band-Aid. Hey, it's only 4 words. Yes, sir. Yeah.
The bark has to be instructional, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But the player will learn what they mean over time.
Mhm.
I'm thinking, like, if an NPC were to say, carry on without me,
Mm-hmm.
can the player be expected to interpret that as they need help?
I think
and
so.
make that choice?
Yeah.
So that's a valid
Yeah.
bark.
Yeah, totally. Now you might need to,
'Cause it's
like,
instructional. It's like
you might
the
want to tie it
opposite.
to world state, right, and say after you've played the first chapter, then you can start using this line.
Right.
Right, yeah. So it was a great question that we just had, which is, once a player plays a game for a while, they're going to get used to how this world works, and you can shorthand things more. And so his example was like, go on without me, right, as a line meaning I'm hurt. Now, if you're just starting like in tutorial mode, you may not know that means, oh, I'm hurt. You can choose to rescue me or not. But let's say we tie that line to world state. So the world has been tracked and we know that we're past the first chapter and you've healed some people. Now the system can start deploying that line efficiently without having people not understand what it means. That's a little more complicated on the back end of narrative design. But basically, yes, you can deploy different lines for the same bark, right, at different times and stages in your game, depending on how enculturated your player is to how things work. Yeah.
It should be like related to the one you know, right?
No, this is totally fresh.
All variations should be like in the same system, right? In the same.
Oh yes, they're all in the same system. Well, no, here. What I mean is, these are actually all different games.
Like if it is like a fighting game,
Mhm.
all the variations for healing should be like a aggressive type of like.
Yeah, definitely. Mhm.
Immediate type. Always should be like that.
On theme, we would say. Yeah. Doing okay?
Can it be something that's not a question?
What would you want to do?
Like, I didn't want to put a question mark.
Oh, you do not have to put a question mark, as long as you know as the player that they need healing. So it could be like, pass the potion or whatever, right? So the question was, do all of these things need to be questions in structure? They do not, as long as they communicate to the player what you need to do. So it could be like, give me the potion, I'm dying. Not, will you please give me the potion?
So that it could also be like a comical kind of thing, like, oh, there's a hole in the thing.
Yeah, comments work. That's great, yeah, you've got it. Hey guys, can I have the time?
3:38.
Okay, great, we're doing good.
Say, I'm dying, yeah, like I'm running out of life. It can also be a prompt for asking for heals, right?
Yes.
In case of like a fantasy world or something, it is not necessarily like it should be like give me the potion or heal me. It can also be like stop my pain, the wounds are killing me, I'm going to die. All
Absolutely,
these,
yes.
Yeah, these are also cries for help. So
As long as they work in your setting, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So let's try to keep the chatter down so the folks who are heads down can keep focused and keep working.
Usual conversation with two characters, so how can we indicate back in character dialogues?
What's the question?
So like let's say we have a perfectly a sophisticated dialogue with two people, like they're just two talking, like how can we make this surrounding like automatically entertain dialogues?
I don't think I understand the question. No, just purely for these prompts. So the question was, is this prompt related to our characters in our other prompt? The answer is it doesn't have to be. I'm not going to be that mean. Write it in the way that's easiest for you right now, because this is actually hard.
Is it a good practice to build in personality into like prompts for the NPC?
What do you mean?
For example, humor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make the request funny. Like,
Oh, yeah.
and stuff like
If
that.
it's part of the character, yeah.
So it makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So just a blank.
Yeah. Has anyone gotten to the procedural narrative part yet? No, I see some scared faces. Hi.
I was just wondering if the part would be something that does it have to be someone else, or could it also be, or in this case, if the player character succeeds at a puzzle task, would it be the player that's saying the book?
Yes, it can be the player character saying it.
Okay, and if it's an NPC asking for healing, could it be something that the player could say? Hey,
No,
this
it has to be the
It has to
NPC.
be the NPC.
So the question was, the player character succeeds at a puzzle task line, whether that's the player character or an NPC. I wrote it as that's the player character saying it, but it's also fine if you want to do it as an NPC commenting on a puzzle being accomplished. The other ones, though, are actually NPCs speaking. The player character can't intercede. I'm coming back. Oh, okay. So I've thrown in some vernacular that is not universally known. Cipher, the word cipher. When a player character is a cipher, it means they're blank slate. It means they don't have a personal archetype. they're not defined as a person, you, the player, occupying their personality, which means that it has to be kind of generic because each player has to feel like they could say that. So you just learned a term of art in narrative design, cipher. You can, as long as you can deliver gold afterwards. Hi.
If I use this well, this is one of the first ciphers. When someone unlocks a puzzle, if I use this.
So let me clarify on ciphers again. So when cipher is used in this context to refer to a type of character, it means that the player character, so the character you're running around as yourself, their personality is a blank slate on purpose so that you, the player, can pretend that it's you. And what that means in practice is that player character can't say anything too far out of the realm that you think you would say, which in practice means those lines usually have to be fairly generic because we all have very different personalities. And if this player character suddenly starts acting like a jerk, and you're like, I'm not a jerk, right? I don't have a smart mouth, then it pulls you out of immersion. That's not good, right? So you want to be kind of centralized in how you personalize the player character when they are a cipher. Now, if it's a character like Aloy, she's not a cipher, she's a specific character, right? So you can give her all the personality you want. But in the case of something like GTA, right, the old ones, not the new ones, you're running around and you're you. That's the difference.
Say a character solves the puzzle easily, will have a different variation, and if they take longer than a certain amount of time, they'll have a different kind of bug.
So I want you to make it hard on yourself. I want you to say it's all the same reaction to the same type of puzzle solve. So let's just say they're all medium. Okay. Okay, we're doing pretty good on time. Yeah, I'll come.
Does the book have to be something that's said? Like, can it be a visual cue?
No, it has to be dialogue.
So, like, let me just throw something. Like in the third scenario, play a character succeeds in the puzzle task, right? So, let's say they succeed in the puzzle task and they just like look at their hands and awe. That's like a visual cue. So, like,
Sure, but we're not writing visual cues. We're writing dialogue for when you solve a puzzle.
So this has to be said, like.
Yes, has to be said out loud. Now we could also use those in a game, but for this exercise, we're focusing on the barks. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So, does it make sense to write more cipher-like characters with first-person shooters as opposed to a third-person like Halo? So, is there like a rule of thumb that you stick to cipher, like writing with first-person and then?
Not always. So I was just, working on a game a few years ago where the main character was a cipher, and it was third-person camera, like high story, like the whole thing. It required a lot of branching, right?
So
but
that ties into like an RPG where you get
yeah.
to kind of
Mm-hmm.
Another word for a cipher can be non-specific character. Like in
Yes.
normal terms.
But cipher sounds cooler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds cool.
For procedurally generated, like procedural narrative, right? Can in gameplay can it still be locked to like non-combat scenario? I mean, I'm
Yes.
programmer.
Yeah.
It can be, right? So over here, because the character is informing the way I'm envisioning it, it's during traversal as you're moving through like
Sure.
environments, right? So keeping that context, can I write?
Yes. The point is you don't know when it's going to be delivered contextually.
Right. So it has to be context free, but contextual to the person's life.
Yes. Yes. You're getting it.
Procedurally, it cannot be too specific and identifiable to a single character.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what it means.
So it means you have to be in the middle between being too specific and too generic. It's hard, but I just want you to experiment with what that may be like, even if you don't completely understand it. An example would be like, when I was younger, we didn't have enough to eat in my house, and I used to have to like steal from the local market, right? It doesn't say exactly when, it doesn't say like who you were, but this person had a hard life. Does that make sense? Yeah. Repeat customer.
For the procedural narrative, is this more like multiple NPCs and that's a template, or is it a single NPC with varied dialogue?
It's a single NPC with varied dialogue, and you don't know when it's going to be delivered. That's the point. Yeah. Yeah.
Procedural narrative, the last one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, with the procedural narrative line, I don't want you to stress a whole lot. I just want you to give it a try. This is the advanced stuff. You're getting a little clue what it might look like. One sec. What's up?
I'm guessing the procedural narrative one isn't just a bar because it has a bigger space for it. Because can you really tell your life story in 5 words?
No. But you can try.
So 5 words is still the end.
Something about their life that's important, right? It doesn't have to be their whole life story in 5 words.
Got it.
Yeah. But it should characterize them. I'll be right with you.
The player has to tell something about their life which is like generic enough to not like be
To set
too
up.
specific.
Yes. It's hard. Yeah. Okay, I'm coming. What was the question over here? Yeah.
There are games like Inside and Limbo where the environment does the storytelling.
Mhm.
So, is there a use of barks or something like that there as well, like indie games?
A user box? What do you mean?
No, barks. The
Oh,
one you're talking
barks. So the question is, does every game have barks? No, not every game has barks, but most games do. So it's a really good skill to have if you're intending to be a professional writer and narrative designer. Let me get him first. Yeah, what's up?
Nowadays, ChatGPT and everything is evolving. How badly does that make this less useful skill, or it doesn't affect this?
Oh, so this is an interesting related question to AI. How good is ChatGPT at writing this? ChatGPT is terrible. So you don't have to worry about your jobs. Like, it's not coming anytime soon. ChatGPT cannot write barks. So we're good.
So I was just wondering, so for this one where it's player character succeeds at a puzzle task,
Mhm.
let's say we have a scenario where our main character is also with an NPC.
Mhm.
Could we have different barks depending on how long it takes our main player character to complete the task?
You
Like,
could.
like, nice, good job, or finally.
Mhm.
Could that?
But you'd want to fight 5 barks for each scenario.
For each scenario.
Yeah, so don't make it harder on yourself. Just pick the single scenario for now. Okay, let's start wrapping it up. I hope you feel challenged. All right, attention up here, folks. Okay, so how did that one go? Okay, we have more thumbs up this time. This is maybe a little easier to wrap our heads around. So barks are the bread and butter of junior level narrative designers and writers. A good bark sheet in your portfolio is very important to getting jobs. So you will have, not this, but something like this in a spreadsheet when you are looking for jobs. Okay, let's talk about other types of writing in games that is not dialogue, right? And barks, which is a subset of dialogue. Let's talk about the other things that you will write as a narrative designer and writer. So that is lore, right? So this could be internal documents, like what's the world of our story? You're gonna post it on Confluence so that all the other designers know. And it could be delivered in-game, like an interactable book that the player can choose to pick up and read. I love those lore books, right? This is things that are longer form writing, but you still, if it's player facing, want to remember only half their brain is paying attention. And you have maybe 3 to 5 seconds of their undivided attention on that thing, before they're going to go, I'm going to close it and go somewhere else, unless they're what we call a lore hound, right, where they will read every single thing. But that is a rare player persona, and we don't want to write everything like it's for lore hounds. So item descriptions, if you've ever played Destiny, right? Item descriptions actually deliver a lot of story and a lot of narrative, and they do it pretty efficiently. So if you want inspiration about how to write good item descriptions, I would say look at Destiny 2 and look at their items. That's when you get asked to do things like this. This is a really good example of high quality work. And then there's all the other stuff that you will be asked to write. And because you are the writer, it could be anything and everything at the studio. I have written the copy for our game on Steam. I have written the tweets telling us about, the story of the game as we release it to players. This is where you just have flexibility as a writer. Maybe you're going to act as a copy editor for a certain thing, right? So having an expansive skill set is great because, again, we all wear multiple hats in video games. And really, anything that you write anywhere else, you could be called to ask in games. So I was working on a project a while ago where I was working on actually developing characters for a game. I was freelance, so I was helping them form those characters. And then they're like, actually, we like this. Do you want to write the comics too? I'd never written a comic before, honestly. I don't know the format very well, but that's my point, is if you're a games writer, being multidisciplinary is really important because the other thing is if you're just depending on game writing for income, like that's your salary, it's going to be a struggle. So if you can write multiple things in multiple areas, you just have more coverage for yourself to live a happy life. Okay, so now we're going to talk about narrative design. We're going to talk about rudimentary narrative design skills. So we just talked a whole lot about writing. What is good writing? How do you actually deliver it? What does it look like for games? And now we're going to talk about skill sets for design thinking. So narrative design is about systems thinking. And most designers who work in other places will know, okay, yeah, we get that. But for writers who maybe narrative design is new, this is really important for you to hear. So design thinking is about how do we make things work structurally, systemically. And this is honestly part of why when I make characters, I make them archetypally, because I can systematize it, right? You can make a really cool, bespoke character, but can you do it again and again and again within a systems context in a game, right? That's what's important, is the delivery. So in my own personal life, I learned this not from video games. I learned this from tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, right? I learned it from pen and paper. I learned it from sitting at a table with some folks and using my imagination and trying things out. So my point is paper prototyping is really valuable. You actually don't need to know blueprints, right, to prototype. You just need to think about how the system works and to be able to trace its path. So when I personally am first creating a narrative system, I get note cards. And I just sketch out the system on the note cards, and then I rearrange them, and I go, okay, I think this is the flow, right? Or I think we need to go through like this subroutine first, or whatever. And then, only then, do I pick up the tools to do it in a game engine. Because if you do it in the game engine the first time and it's wrong, you've just wasted so much time, resources, and money. So learn paper design if you're a writer trying to learn narrative design. And if you're an engineer trying to think about writing, maybe practice paper design with writers who don't get engineering and see if you can find a middle place of communication. So it's not hard, paper prototyping. It's not over anybody's head in here. I promise you can all do it. Give it a shot the next time you want to work on something that's systems related. So I mentioned earlier, ludonarrative harmony, our $10 word. This is where that word comes into play a lot, right? Narrative systems. Is the meaning of the systems relevant to the meaning of the game? Are the thematic pillars being served? So this is where you really get into the juice of ludonarrative harmony, the mechanics in the narrative, is in the design thinking and in the narrative design itself. So what's in the narrative design wheelhouse? What do they do that writers don't do? So as I mentioned, narrative designers do story branching design and structures. They create dialogue systems, quest systems, procedural narrative design, so actually making the system that delivers those horrible vague lines that you were trying to write. Implementation, so actually taking things and putting them in the engine. And interdisciplinary work with other verticals, as maybe you've heard me say the word interdisciplinary way too many times, but I'm trying to make a point, right? We're doing this together, and we have to communicate with other branches who are working on things in the game so that we're all on the same page. So that's everything from combat to audio to camera controls. It's conducting the whole thing in sync with each other. So you had a taste of procedural narrative. There's much more of it out there. So what you saw in the BARCS exercises had a very specific requirement, right? Young woman, early 20s, urban. And then you had to write something kind of in between being specific and really general. And that is the dance of procedural narrative if you're using it in your systems, right? Not every game needs procedural narrative, most of them don't, but newer ones are using it more and more for dynamic interaction. It's delivered in a number of different scenarios, right? That can be in any number of ways. So it could be, as I mentioned, RNG, which means randomization. It could be based on world state, so you've unlocked chapter 1, and now these certain dialogues will play. You've unlocked chapter 2, so now these certain dialogues will play, but you don't know exactly when. That's the whole point of procedural narrative. You don't know when it's being delivered. So it needs to be somewhat contextless. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Twine. So I love Twine because it's a really accessible piece of software for getting started with putting together all of these things we've been talking about. It's free, it's small, it's compact, it works on PC and Mac and Linux, so have at it. Twine is not the only program out there. There's also Ink, which I have used. There's some other ones too. Twine just has a really large user base, so you're able to ask a lot of questions. There's a lot of documentation, but use what's right for you. I'm not saying like you have to use Twine, but this is what I recommend if you are just starting out as a narrative designer and writer. Once you create a Twine game, and we're going to get into what that actually looks like, where do you put it, right? Because Twine games are usually like solo things or maybe with 1 or 2 other people. You don't need a massive team to make a Twine game. My recommendation is you put it on itch.io. Itch is a gaming platform. It's mostly indie focused, and it's very, very much alive and thriving. I have games on itch, right? Yes, I do. It's a great place to house your Twine game so that you can then go show it in your portfolio to other people when you're trying to get hired, right? You don't need to have personal resources to run your own website. If you can't do that, host it on Twine and then have the portfolio links in your portfolio. So what I would suggest, if you're really serious about giving this a shot, is building a catalog of portfolio Twine games, right? A small portfolio, and we'll go into specifics of what's in, like how big a Twine game should be. But this is where people like me, hiring managers for narrative, which I have been for some time, we want to see what you can do. And Twine games are dialogue, right? They're basic narrative branching, thought design, and it's your ability to complete a project, which is actually somehow much harder than we think it is. So those are great proofs to someone like me who wants to hire you that like, okay, you're ready to do this. Okay, so this is going to be a little esoteric before we ground it in actually messing with Twine, but I want to talk about what makes a good Twine game and what makes a bad Twine game from the perspective of narrative design specifically. So not like art assets or how fancy it is, but just the bones of what you're trying to say. So in branching narrative, which Twine is just branching narrative, to be clear, it's just branching narrative, the thing that you want to keep in mind is this idea of trees that fractally out forever is actually really bad. That's not sustainable. Everybody tries it once and then goes, oh no, I can't finish this. Yes, because it becomes too much of a load. So when you're thinking about in your head, what's the structure of your game visually, do not think tree. I know we're saying branches. I know it's really easy to go to the tree metaphor. Don't. Think in diamonds. So you have a starting point, and then you have some branches out, and then you bring those branches back in to more simplified singular points. and then you branch out again, and then you bring it back. You've got to bring it back. If you don't keep it simple when you're trying to finish it up, that game will eat you. So when you're thinking about basic narrative branching structures, think of diamonds, not trees. Agency is something that we've been talking about a little bit up till now. And in Twine, agency is important to get right. So you don't want to just tell a story, right? Again, that's a novel. You need to have interesting choices, compelling choices in your Twine game to make the player want to click the next link. We've talked about how to do that, right? Compelling psychology, seduction. You want to draw them in to being interested in finding out where the story goes next, which means you just can't write a novel. You've got to make space for them to make an imprint on what's going on. So how do we actually give them those choices? Volitionally. So volitional choice basically means informed choice. So if I click that link, I can basically expect the outcome, right? I can choose to do bad or I can choose to do good. But if you make me think I'm doing good and I'm actually doing bad, that's a violation of volitional choice. Now, again, I'm speaking in generalities. Sometimes you want to pull one over on your player. But for the most part, if you don't honor volitional choice, if you don't make the choices at least moderately transparent so they understand the consequences of the choice they're about to make, it's bad design. So always check in on how you're doing with volitional choice, because if you're not doing right, your players are just going to bounce out. They're just going to be like, oh, this is stupid. False choices. So false choices are choices that just absolutely do not matter to the game. They're like making you think the choice matters, pick A or pick B, and this will happen. But if nothing happens, then it's a false choice. It like literally is not a thing. And that's not fun in a Twine game, so please don't do that. Now the next bullet point here is content exposure. And what I mean by that is you're gonna write like a lot of stuff in your Twine game. And depending on how you structure it, more of it could be seen during a playthrough, or less of it could be seen through a playthrough, right? So through the branching narrative, it could be hard to get to, right? This outcome only happens if you do a very specific path. You want to be conscious and efficient with your content exposure, which means if you really want to be very esoteric and have this labyrinthine Twine game where the point is the player feels lost, go for it. But if you don't, try to expose as much content as possible. Practice being efficient so that when you're in the big systems, in the big games, you can still practice that efficiency and be responsible with the development power that you have and the resources that you have. So an example is a Twine game that I made. It's about a 15-minute play experience, about 3,000 words in total when I made it. And I would say content exposure was like 60%. That's actually pretty high. But I felt good about that amount of content exposure so that if a player played through, on average, they get 60% of the content that I had written, right? Everybody's content exposure will be different on how they choose to structure their games, but it's something you want to be thinking about because it will have consequences later in your career as you're learning how to stack those skills. Yes? Question? Oh, so a really good question about replayability. So the question is, does it affect replayability? Yeah, it does. But you have to ask yourself, when you start making the game, what is your desire for replayability? Is replayability important, or is it not? So if you say, yes, replayability is important, maybe your content exposure is lower on purpose. But maybe you say, no, I just need to deliver this single experience. They're really only supposed to run through it one time. Then you want content exposure to be high. Okay, railroading and authorial moral judgment. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the important word here is feelings. So I've been talking a little bit about how we're basically magicians and this is a magic show and it's all illusion. So if the illusion is successful, that the choices matter, then the choices matter. If they feel like it mattered, then it matters. Even if you know underneath the hood that there's only 2 outcomes, as long as you don't telegraph that to them and they feel like what they did mattered, that's what matters. So there's a difference between veracity and experience, right? We are experiential designers. We are designing an experience. The experience is what counts. So back to railroading and authorial moral judgment. So, yes. Okay.
Would trees not be better for replayable experiences, giving the player a different experience, like every time he goes down a different branch, instead of diamonds where it's like it is a different branch, but it ends at the same point?
So it doesn't just have to be linear diamonds. It doesn't have to be diamond, 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 right? It can be diamond, 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 meta diamond, right? Meta, meta diamond, right? You can have meta diamonds, but this is just like my advice. Like if you're trying to do this for the first time, branches will usually just get you stuck. So I'm trying to help you get finished by keeping that diamond structure in mind. There are other structures, like you don't have to use a diamond or a branch, but this is kind of like the Wild West, and we're just putting some ground rules in so that people can give it a try and then experiment on their own later. So again, like I'm not like the police of how you structure your narrative. I'm just trying to be helpful in making sure you finish your first game. Okay, now back to railroading and authorial moral judgment. We all have opinions. We all have opinions about what is right and what is wrong. Your game is not your mouthpiece to tell a player what you think is right and wrong. You want to do that? Again, write a novel, right? You are building space for them to explore within your theme what they think is right and wrong. So you can have consequences. You can have things not work out well if they do certain things. But the moment a player feels like you're preaching something at them and you're punishing them for not making the right choice that you, the developer, think is correct, that's no good, right? That's not honoring agency, and you're gonna get in trouble with the player. It's not gonna be a very good experience. And lastly, bad endings. So if you ever played the, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question is really, what about serious games, right? What about games where our actual objective is to teach you about climate change? So I only make games in the entertainment sector. So I'm kind of wiggling out of this question, actually. I make games for entertainment. I know how to do that. I think serious games are very hard. And I'm not sure that serious games have solved that problem. What I would say is, set it up where the consequences are experienced, but not told. If I tell you that's bad, I'm shaking my finger at you. But if you, in the game, watch the tree slowly die, you go, ooh, I don't feel so good. And that's what you actually want, right? So maybe one adaptation is to make it more experiential and less finger waggy. Like if you have to tell them, find a different way besides telling them. Make it an experience rather than a moral. Yeah, serious games are hard. So if you ever played the books, which were like choose your own adventure, especially like Goosebumps, I don't know, that was a thing when I was a kid. And they were like horror novels, and you would just like turn a page and a shark ate you. And you're like, wait a minute. I didn't know that was going to result in that. That is a violation of volitional choice, right? So that's not good. And if the bad ending doesn't serve a purpose, if it doesn't serve the theme, if it doesn't serve the experience, if it doesn't enrich the player, it's no good. Because you can have bad endings, you can play to lose, you can have horrifying experiences, but they have to get something out of it. If it's just like, ha ha ha, you died, I win, I'm the designer, that's no good. That's about your ego. And this is not about our ego, right? This is about their agency. So if you want a really good example of everything that I said not to do, play Bandersnatch on Netflix. That game drives me nuts because it breaks almost every single one of these rules, right? And if you play Bandersnatch, you will get frustrated by these things. So this is a great opportunity to learn by what others have done wrong. So if you haven't, go try that interactive fiction on Netflix, playing Bandersnatch. It's like literally a Twine game, but with film, right? And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's a perfect example. Yes? My best example. Oh, wow, I forgot the name of one of my favorite games. The indie game where he's a detective and he's really depressed. Disco Elysium. That would be my answer. Thank you. Got me covered. You can tell we're a couple hours into this. So, let's see, what time is it? I might actually skip this exercise and not torture you. No, we're going to do it. Okay, so if you just have a piece of paper, this still works. What I want you to do is to create little Post-it notes on your piece of paper, write what happens in the Post-it note, and connect it with a line to the next Post-it note, and pretend that it's Twine. And I'll show you what I mean visually here in a second. But if you have Twine downloaded on your PC, now's the time to open it. And otherwise, we're just going to do the best we can with the materials we have.
Yeah. Hey, I have a doubt about volitional choices.
Yep.
How do I build risk tolerance in my players without frustrating them? Like, if, for example, if I want to educate my players about, how risky it is to go to an area, even if they're low on, even if they choose to do so, despite being low on resources, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How do I punish them for that without frustrating them?
You tell them ahead of time. So the question was volitional choice. I want my players to take risks. There's a dangerous area that could kill them. I want them to experiment with going in there. You just let them know, oh man, the monsters in there are really big. Are you sure?
Right, but like I'm talking about how do I help them develop that level of tolerance so that they know that at this level that they feel I don't want to stay outright. No, when you're at, for example, if this game had a level system, I don't want to say outright that wait until you're level 45 or level 50 before you go there, because that's when you'll match the monsters there. But because that I think might break their experience. But how can I do that otherwise?
So every game establishes a communication pattern between the designers and the players, whether either party recognizes it or not. So the designers have a particular way of communicating particular things, right? This could be dangerous. The key is to stay consistent so that the player enculturates to the way that you're talking to them, and so they know to watch for the signs. Oh, whenever there's a yellow box outside of a door, I know that's danger, right? Oh, I know every time an NPC says, like, are you sure you want to go there? That's danger. The key is consistency of your design language, informing the player of how things are supposed to work. So that's actually way above the narrative design level, right? That's like a full systems level thing.
Good. Thanks.
You guys are really trying to avoid this Twine work, huh?
Actually, I had a design where our player, it is a Metroidvania game and story-based, narration-based, and at the end of the game, the boss, final boss, it is alien-based. Okay, so yeah, the final boss, from the start to the finish, whatever player makes choices, whatever he does, at the end, boss tells him that whatever you have decided and played along, that was my entire plan. That was my entire master plan.
Okay.
So you told, right, that don't do that, but my ideology was entirely opposite, against it, right? So is it well or fine to make player feel small or negligent about his ideas, what he did?
That all depends on whether or not it's fun, right? Is it fun to feel small? Now you might be like, always no. That's not true. Sometimes it can feel fun, but you, the designer, have to make sure that that is a fulfilling experience, right? If you're cutting them off at the knees and it feels like you, the designer, are laughing at them and going, ha ha ha, you, player, are small, that's no good. But if you're like, hey, this is thematic to what we're doing, this game is about leveraging power and making you change and your psychology, and this is a low moment for your character, you're going to experience it with them, and then you're going to have a payoff. Contextually, that's great, right? So there's no black and white answer to this. It's have you done the work to support that choice as a designer? Okay, guys, twine is really easy, I promise. There's only one thing you need to know, and that is how to make links. So again, imagine note cards. You've got a note card, and you've written it, and then you want to link to the next note card. What do? You just need double brackets. That's literally it. You don't need to know any code. It's just double brackets. And if you want to be very fancy, you can put an arrow in there so that your double brackets text is disguised as a different set of text. This is literally it. Anybody can do this. So I want you to at least try. If you have a PC and you've got twine, open it up. And if you're on a piece of paper, I want you to be able to scribble on a little imaginary note cards and make lines between them. And again, I'm going to visualize for you what I mean. So first we're going to look at a twine file together, so you're not starting out a complete blank slate. I'm going to pull up a twine file that was a really, really early small piece of a game that I made called At the Shore. It's on itch if you ever want to play it. And I'm just going to pull it up now. So I closed the 1 million documents. Okay. There's my twine. There's At the Shore. So this is my twine program. And you can't see it. Wonderful. Windows P. Duplicate. There we go. Okay, so not rocket science. Like I said, is note cards with little arrows between. So what we're looking at is just part of a story that I made and published later called At the Shore. And I did this at a game jam. I recommend game jams. But basically, this is it, right? I put in an image, and I said, click to begin. That's my first slide, right? Double tags is all I need. And then I said, here's the first piece of text. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's narrative. And then I make a link to the next piece of text, which is simply the word skin in 2 link bars, right? So what I want from you right now is just to put the visualization in your head, in case you're not working directly with twine, of what I mean structurally here. Now you can see this is the beginning of a meta diamond, right? We've got the first 2 branches of this diamond, and in later development of this game, this diamond came back several times, right? But when you want to branch, let's look at a branching one. You just simply add 2 different links, and it makes 2 different branches. So now comes the hard part. I'm going to leave this up because I know we're going to need it for reference. But let me pull up my spreadsheet really quick here and tell you what you're going to do. So we are going to do a quickest game jam on Earth. You're going to have 5 minutes only for story ideation. My suggestion to you is that you take those characters that you made and their conversation and you work with that. And you're going to use their simple arcs to create a very, very short story. I mean a really, really, really short story. You are not doing an epic right now. You're practicing your skills to make something bigger later. Then you're going to do 5 minutes for outline. That's planning your story. So what do I think the structure is going to be? What are the different choices that I think are going to happen generally? And then I'm giving you 30 whole minutes to actually make a twine game. Now, you may be feeling like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this in enough time. That's on purpose, okay? I'm with you here because all I want you to do is get through being time-boxed. Being time-boxed is one of the most important things about being a narrative designer and a writer. You only have so much time to do stuff, right? And those constraints are actually good. When you have 5 minutes to make a story, you just spit something out. And it doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad or it's your best work or it's your worst work. You just do it, right? So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes of story ideation. 5 minutes of outline. 30 minutes of making your game. And again, if you're doing this on a piece of paper, I'm going to pull up the general structure of what a twine structure looks like, and I want you to just try to do it in the same way, okay? I'm going to walk around. I'm going to be available the whole time. And again, you're not going to do this perfectly. You may not finish, but the point is I want you to try. I want you to try to finish in this 30 minutes because it's important to understand how to work to a time constraint. And then you'll have something that you can work with later. So your 5 minutes of story ideation starts now. The point is to be quick. Outline. So outline is planning the basic beats of how the story will go.
And how is this a game? Like, it is like a dynamic story, right? Wherein we are reading the story dynamically.
The player is choosing which branches of the story to go down. That's how it's a game.
And you're just like reading a story like behavior-wise.
They're making choices about where the story will go based on their choices. Yeah. Just spit it out, 5 minutes. What's going to happen? How are you doing?
All right.
You hanging in there?
I love my characters. So
Good. Yeah. I warned you. I warned everybody. Mm-hmm.
How do you make two pages conversion to the same page?
So you'll write the link in one page, and you'll just use the same link in the one that you are doing from the other branch, and it will go to the same one. Again, the point is I just want you to get your hands wet with twine. It's not scary. You can do it. And I want you to practice the time boxing. Just spit that story out. Okay, so what's the name of this one? Entitled Passage 1. Okay, there's nothing in it. So what I want you to do is open this one.
Should he name that page first and then?
Yeah, you name it, and then the link is the name of the page. Yes. Edit. There you go. So what you do is, you didn't tell me how you'd end up here. Now, you're going to make a link to your next passage, and you're going to name it, whatever you want to name it, right? And that will make the next passage. Yeah, you got it. Oh, it dropped. Sorry, guys. I'll fix that. There we go. And I'll just load this one up because it has 2 choices on it. So I'll make it easy for you to see how to do it. 2 bracket links. You have 2 minutes to finish ideating on your story. The next 5 minutes will be some pre-planning. 2 minutes, ideate.
When do you know when one part of the process is done enough to move on to the next one?
You don't.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is it just a muscle that like
Use the time boxing. Yeah.
Because right now I feel like I know enough, but I could keep adding to it because I have 2 more minutes.
Don't.
Right?
Yeah. Resist the urge.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Goes to its access denied. I don't think I can.
Oh,
open
is it? Okay.
Something to change.
Yeah, I didn't know you had an itch account.
I don't. It's on someone else's itch account.
That's the secret.
Yeah.
That's why I was confused.
Are you still convinced you want to be narrative designers? I'm coming.
dialogues or any choice made also?
Any choice. So this doesn't have to be just things said out loud. It can actually be like text too. Like he picks up the book. He picks up the blue book or the green book, and those can be your choices too. Does that make sense?
From that blue book, we can continue that text.
And can we also like prompts, for example, if there is a promotion party, you have to talk to 3 people, such like that?
You can, as long as you can figure out how to actually branch it back to where you want to go. Yeah. Yeah. Now, there are more complicated ways to do branching. You can add math in, right? If they've picked 2 of these 3 choices in the past, now this branch opens up. We're not doing that right now. We're only doing simple linear narrative branching because you have 1 more minute before you have to start outlining. Yes?
So at this point, we just need a story with a start and a middle and an end.
Correct.
That's it.
Yes. Make it simple, not complex.
So I just want to know that after some time I want to trigger the next dialogue. So how do I do it? I'm not able to kind of get it.
Absolutely. So what you do is you're going to put in your brackets, what do you want to name the next page?
Okay.
Write that in. Okay. Close those brackets. Close this. Magic. Yeah. Okay, you need to move on. Time's up. The double quotes are for making a new page, a new sticky note, right? It leads you to the next branch. So now you're going to spend 5 minutes outlining. Outlining is the basic beats of your story, you know, what your plan is to execute when you hit those 30 minutes of actually writing. So now you're going to take your ideation, your story idea, you're going to give it some elemental structure in your brain so that when you hit runtime of actually writing it, you can go. So think about outlining what happens in your story now. You have 5 minutes. So you've got it.
No, but even if I don't put
You've got to close it.
double quotes, it still works.
Oh, that's for something that, the double quotes are for showing that it's dialogue. That's it. If it's not dialogue, you don't need the double quotes. It's only the brackets that matter. Yeah.
What kind of information does a good outline include? When does it stop being an outline? When is it not enough of an outline?
It's too much of an outline if it's over-prescriptive. And it's not enough of an outline if someone else can't pick it up and roughly execute what needs to be done. Yeah. So as part of your outlining, you could just like write a paragraph. These are the things that are going to happen. Or you could put in like placeholder pieces in your twine game, and then as you start designing, work your way towards them too, right? There's no set way to do it. Whatever way is outlining is best for you, give it a shot.
So in my story, basically the overall game is to fill the well with the water before sunset, by collecting containers of water and then stopping the demons from taking it away. So I was thinking of having 2 characters. One is like somebody who collects, the other is protects from the demons, but then how do I start?
Well, what do you want to be the mechanic for succeeding? Like, how do you succeed? Is it by making morally good choices? Is it by tricking demons? Is it by avoiding them? What are the actual choices that are going to be available to players when they're actually in this environment to get to be able to fill up the wells? Okay. Okay, 1 more minute. Yep. I'll come. And this is good for me.
So if we did the overview, then we do some of the branching, which way we're gonna go, and then the next overview.
The next 30 minutes will be actually writing the full thing. So you're probably going
So
to need
those
more pieces of
decision
paper.
Those decision points, what dialogues would go
What
with
dialogues go in them? Yep, you got it. You're doing good. Hanging in there. Okay, I tricked you. Your time is up, and you have 20 minutes to write your story. Go. Now, there's a very good reason why I did this. Do you know why? Because this is how it works in video games, guys. So 20 minutes, do as much as you can to finish your story in Twine or on your pieces of paper, hook or by crook, get that thing done. One second, I'll be right back.
Sure, how to structure like the Twine thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
You have 12 minutes. I love the unbelieving face. Yeah.
In the story, the stage is collapsing.
Mhm.
So it is outside the character's limits.
Mhm.
How should I
So you can write in third person omniscient. It doesn't have to be dialogue or from the character's point of view, as long as the player gets to make the choices about what happens to the character. Yeah.
So after writing a few of the dialogues, at least in my head, I haven't got it out on paper. It feels like some procedural
Mhm.
content should come in where I must interact and do a click on screen.
Mhm.
So that will be a new diamond then.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if it's just a random thing to explore.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly a diamond. This is more like guidelines, Pirates Code. Yeah.
How do I make this point after that? I mean, I thought it was an arrow thing, but it's not an arrow thing.
So close this for me, whatever the name of this is, you put it in those brackets. So
No, but I want the text to be something else.
that's when you use the little arrow.
Okay, the arrow is the text.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Just switch them. We're almost done, guys. I'm almost done torturing you. I promise. I'll come. Don't worry.
Done right now.
Mhm.
So I have a story. So what I did was I structured how the
Mhm.
mission was going to be, gave them some choices, and I've left it in the middle because it's a contest.
So now time to
And,
sort of
yeah,
bring it
now
back,
this
yeah.
is how I'm bringing it here. I know what my conflict point is going to be.
Mhm.
So put that here. These two choices are similar only, and then it does it leads to the same thing,
Mhm.
and then the story continues. This is what we had to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You did it. Good
And,
job.
Do you want to just read the outline?
Sure. Don't read this?
No, yeah, this is just like
Okay. I'm going to read it anyway.
okay. Like it's the same thing.
It's a good start. No, it's good. Yeah. Whatever you're doing, that looks great. Excellent. Eight minutes, and then we are wrapping this up, and we are taking it home.
the talk, we want to put a QR code to get feedback and give it to you guys. But the point is that we just want to gather some feedback.
Yeah.
So
I have the picture with me. Can I pass
the
it
PNG.
to those guys? Yeah, the
Yeah,
PNG.
we can totally do that.
Yeah. They want nothing on general screen. They just process it.
Just picture at the very end of everything.
Totally fine.
Just the thing that at the end saying, hey guys, please fill this.
Yeah. Okay.
All going well?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm also leaving now. So
Yeah.
see you later.
Dude, look at this room. It's amazing because we had a workshop last year, and by this time, the people were
Oh, wow.
I'm still seeing people like sitting on the floor in the back. They don't want to get up. They're just like, we're fine.
The really nice data point that we get from this is that there's such a hunger to learn.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll see what the feedback says. I might have an answer. I don't know. We'll see.
I've gotten to a point where I have similar line that's calling for a real fight and need to connect so that it goes in one direction from there. What do I do?
So from one of them, make the link you want to make, right?
Okay. That's already there. Yeah.
So then use the same title. So you're trying
That's
to get
all
to
I
this
need to
one?
do?
Yes.
Okay.
Just plug in the same title. It will automatically link to it.
Oh, okay. I see.
Ta-da. So I just want to say I'm really proud of what I'm seeing in this room. I just want you to know that like you're doing remarkable things right now. I'm seeing really, really, really great stuff. So thank you for being bought in to this process and willing to give it your all today.
So I know you said we can't just like pull the rug from our players, right? But this is about a good witch and an evil king who pretends to be good. So it's sort of like choose your spell, and the spell is going to take you to the destiny. So if she tells the people she knows what the king did, the king banishes her. And if she casts a spell of truth, the king tells the truth but then blames her. And I want the outcome to be that he banishes her either ways.
That's still good.
Is it fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause then the risk is there, right?
Yeah.
Can you change an archetype of a character in the game in a midway? Like,
I would very heavily suggest against it.
like in God of War, Ragnarok, like the Odin met Atreus with a very a very nurturing character, but at the end he like changes into an anti.
At the end.
Yeah.
Not in the middle.
Okay. Yeah. So like. Okay. And that.
Yeah.
So I recently applied for a job which required branching storytelling, but it was a very specific situation. So I was supposed to write scenarios about BSc IT students learning about soft skills such as emotional intelligence and all that.
It sounds really boring.
Yeah, and I couldn't finish it in a day. Like I couldn't write branching choices and all, and I kind of gave up. But right now I could write normally when you taught and all. I was able to finish it. Now I'm done. So my question was, when it is a specific scenario like that, they are supposed to give me research material for that, or like something to pull from, or like.
Maybe not. I mean,
if it is specific, what I'm supposed to do then? Like then, if it is specific,
I mean,
I don't know the.
Yeah.
I'm not a BSc IT student, so.
No, it's fine. This is much more comfortable. I mean, really, it sounds like what happened in your particular case is they just didn't set you up for success.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And you can learn to work faster over time, but if they don't understand your skill set and where you are, like junior, senior, and they try to give you something but they don't support you, what can you do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Look for the next one. Yes.
You mentioned something about having a company in Bangalore. Actually, we're from Bangalore.
Yes.
Do you have a card or anything?
I do. Come see me after we're done. Okay, TikTok. 3-minute warning. Yeah, that's 3. I can still count. Good. Two minutes. Finish it up. Bring it home. Doesn't matter where you are. Make it work. Yeah, yeah.
So this is how it starts. So it picks up from the two people who you said, right? So it picks up from there. I'm just calling them husband and wife because I missed their names. So it starts from here. So actually the backstory is here. I'll just really quick I'll show that. This is him and this is her.
Okay, let me read it. Ooh, beloved in quotes, nasty. This is very Hades-like.
What?
This is what it reminds me of Hades.
Oh, Hades.
Have you played
Yeah,
Hades?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you done?
Yeah.
So this is the story. Start from on the battlefield.
How do we know which ones are the choices?
The choices are A and B.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
So die, like this is where they tap die and it goes to the next square.
Okay. Okay, I think on a rudimentary level, you've got it. This is looking good.
And his name's Quick Kill. I always do that
Oh,
with my
nice.
names.
Yeah, this looks great. Okay, time is up. You're done. No more exercises for today. Now, if you are working on an iPad or a phone or a piece of paper, I want you to recognize that you are able to design today at the level of a narrative designer who works for real money, right? You did it. So I want you to feel actually very proud of what you've done, whether it was scribbling on paper or in an Excel spreadsheet or in Twine. Like, that's real work. You did it. That's real narrative design work that you can take with you out of this workshop and put in your portfolio. So let's finish up here. Okay, so if you want to continue down this path still, my recommendation is to continue to be curious and to consume good art because that helps you be a good artist. So if you're looking at other Twine games, because Twine is new to you, to look at as examples, I have a few for you. One is called American Election. The other is The Writer Will Do Something. This one is hilarious because it's about writing for games. And then anything by the Twine author Porpentine. Porpentine is quite an amazing artist. Everything that they do is really interesting and cool and avant-garde. And then explore on your own, to your own tastes, what's in the ecosystem so that you can understand what you want to write. Okay, so basically all the things we've gone through today are the stubs, the roots of what will become your portfolio for real working, real live narrative design and writing. So what should go in your portfolio if you're trying to get hired in games? A couple Twine games, no more than 15 minutes of playtime so that the person evaluating you can understand if you can finish narrative branching, right? You can bring it home. And approximately 3,000 words each. They don't need to be mega novels. They need to be something digestible so that you can be judged on your work. A screenplay or a portion of a screenplay. This is especially if you're trying for something for voiced dialogue, where dialogue has to be sharp and sparkling. Usually it's a 30 or 60-minute pilot or feature or a portion of one of those. Examples of other paid gig work in your portfolio. Avoid long-form fiction. This is just not popular with narrative directors. We don't have time for this. Just give us stuff related to games. And please never send poetry. I love poetry. Like, I am a published poet. Like, that's a thing. But like, it's just, if you say that I taught you and you put poetry in your portfolio, my ghost will haunt you. Please don't do it. Okay, how do you actually break into getting these jobs? Perfect your portfolio and get it on the web. Whether it's your own website, whether it's itch.io, and very importantly, do not say that you are an aspiring, right, narrative designer or writer. You are a narrative designer and writer. You did it today. Okay? You're not aspiring. You are. So I don't want to see that word in those portfolios either. Do game jams. So you just experienced a very, very, very tiny mini game jam. But game jams are a great way to grow skills, experiment, fail early, fail fast, try it again, make friends who then become employed, who then might bring you with them, right? You're not networking, you're making a community. Your peers, the people who are gonna come up with you, those are actually the important people in your life. It's not me. It's not the people who are up here. It is the people around you feeding each other, encouraging each other, lifting each other up. That is how you're gonna get jobs, by being a good community member, all right? And if you have a specific skill set, for instance, like me, narrative design with mythology themes, because I came from a very high-level academic background in mythology, make it your niche. So if your niche is like World War II subs, right? Make that your niche. If your niche is anime, make that your niche. Be an expert in something, but don't fake it, like actually be the expert, so that people know they can go to you for this. Oh, she's really good at horror. Oh, they're really good at romance. Oh, he's really good at this type of design. You want to become known for this thing, so that when people want to find that person, they know to come to you. And chip away at freelance credits if you're not landing those full-time roles. Those full-time roles are hard. You have a lot of competition. And that's exactly what I did, right? I did a whole bunch of small freelance gigs. I built up my repertoire so that by the time I was ready to go for the FTE job, I was ready. Sometimes you luck out, you get in right away. Sometimes someone you know is like, hey, I've got a project. But don't be afraid of the freelance life for as long as it takes to get to a full-time position, if that is what you want. And finally, play games critically. Not all the time, you still need to feel some joy, but you need to start thinking like a designer, and you need to understand why games are working the way they work, why these narrative systems work or don't work, why the emotion is effective or not effective. Because one of the things I will ask in one of my interviews is, tell me about the narrative structure of one of the games you've played recently and how it could be improved. If you're not thinking about that, you're going to be caught completely flat-footed by questions like those. So, know your worth. If you're working for a company that makes money, never work for free. I don't care what they say, I don't care what they're doing, unless you are going in together with friends who are all poor and not getting paid, right? Be paid, because otherwise you're undercutting everybody else who is trying to make a living as a narrative designer and writer. It's just not cool. Know what your fair pay scales are. So unfortunately, I can't tell you what the fair pay scales are for narrative designers in India, because I just got here. But I do know what they are in the US, right? And at an associate level, at a junior level, it's about $50 an hour for freelancers, because they have to take out taxes and all that stuff. So know actually how much you should be getting paid, so that you can be prepared to have those conversations with the people that are hiring you, and you don't get exploited, because that's no fun. So what that also means is you gotta learn about contracts and how they work. Now, most narrative design and game writing is work for hire, which means you do not own that IP and you never will. So if you work for someone else's game and you come up with all these great ideas, they will own them. That's how it works. So you do want to make sure that there's just nothing really icky in a contract, that you will be paid fairly, but don't expect to keep the IP unless it's your company. And finally, if you'd rather take the interactive fiction route, so the ones that it's basically like really large narrative branching novels like gigantic twines, you can get paid for that too. So there's a company called Choice of Games. They basically an interactive fiction platform. They will contract pretty much anybody to write really large interactive fiction pieces for about $7,000 USD, which is not bad. But be aware that length and content-wise, they're equivalent of like 2 to 3 novels. So make sure that's what you really want to do. And finally, learn by doing. Right? That was the whole point of these entire 3 hours, is learning by doing. I promise you, this is the best way. Reading books is not going to get you anywhere. Do the stuff that you want to do, fail spectacularly, do it again. You're actually going to learn really fast. So do game jams. Do game jams, do game jams, do game jams. Where are game jams? So there's local game jams, there's regional game jams. I suggest connecting with the global game jam community on Discord, where they have events all year round. And of course, itch.io, which I mentioned earlier, has a gigantic game jam calendar. Literally, like every day, there's something going on. So just pick what interests you and do those jams, right? You can do them distributed. You don't even have to be in person. So books, I just mentioned I'm not a fan, which is really funny because I come from academia. But I'll be honest, like most of the books on narrative design and writing in games are not very good. And so there's only 2 that I would be willing to suggest to you today. The first one is the Game Narrative Toolbox, edited by Anne Lemay and a bunch of other folks that I know, really good. And the other one is, unfortunately, a little expensive, so you might want to get it from your library, but Procedural Storytelling in Game Design. So that one is like not a one-on-one book, right? That's a more advanced book, very solidly written by very smart narrative designers, and it can really like engender a lot of thinking for you about how to advance this art form. So I also spent a lot of time in this presentation talking about archetypes, psychology, archetypal structure. That is a separate skill set. And so I would say if you're interested in that and you want to read more, there's 2 books that I think you should read. Man and His Symbols, that is by Carl Jung himself, and The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, which basically breaks down all the reasons why I had you go through those steps to make a character. So that's it. I'm not sure how much time we have for Q&A. We have 5 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions that are left. But first, I want you all to give yourselves a round of applause. That was amazing. Okay. Yes, I can. Yeah, we can put the QR code up. So we're going to be putting up a QR code that is for feedback. Everything was lovely, and it was great, and you loved it. But seriously, the programming at IGDC is always striving to get better and better every year. We would love to know what you think and how to improve next year, too. Right now, I do these for Clarion in Seattle. I'm not sure when I get settled in Bangalore what it will look like, but I'm happy to do programming there if we can figure it out. Yeah. Okay.